My grandfather was about to give me everything. In the inheritance, I'm talking the house, I'm talking the business, I'm talking I'm gonna be CEO. And then he found out that I'm not really the rightful heir. Let me explain, but it all has something to do with my evil grandmother. Have you thought that someone close to you would try backstabbing you? And not just anybody close, but specifically a family member? Well, life is just full of surprises. This is going to be a lengthy read, but I swear it's worth it. Also, this is a throwaway account because I don't just want anyone coming back to me, but I did want you guys' comments and opinions on my situation. So, let me go ahead and give you some context first. I'm 25 female and I lost my parents 10 years ago. It was a terrible, terrible car accident, and I still have not properly healed from the accident. But rather, I just learned to live and cope. However, my grandfather Jeffrey has been my biggest support and comfort. He and grandmother became my legal guardians when my parents passed away. My father had written his will that if anything happened to him or my mom, he wanted grandfather to have custody of me, and I'm glad that he chose my grandfather. I've always had a very great relationship with my grandpa. Even after my parents passed away, you see, Grandpa only had sons and my father was the only one of his siblings to have a girl. So my grandfather has always had a soft spot for me. Unlike my grandmother, she's always treated me differently from my cousins who are boys. It never bothered me because I just thought that she favored her granddaughter from her previous marriage. So before my grandmother met my grandfather, she was married to this man called Matthew, who was her childhood sweetheart. They grew up together and got married immediately after high school because my grandmother fell pregnant with her oldest child. Unfortunately, the marriage did not last for reasons only known to them. She then met my grandfather and had 3 sons with him. I've just always found it weird how my father was her so-called favorite, yet she's never liked me that much and I'm his only child, but I guess her fate for my mother was that strong. A part had hope that our relationship would get better and improve once I moved in with them, but it seemed like it only made things worse. A few years after my parents' accident, my grandmother would always bring up the fact that I looked nothing like my father or his side of the family at family events. She would specifically do it when family members were around. She would bring up the fact that all my cousins had dark hair like her, and my grandfather, while I was blonde. She would also mention that none of my dad's side of the family had green eyes like me. So basically, she was questioning my paternity, and I never understood why. Just to clear things up for you guys a bit, I am my mother's photocopy. I inherited all her features, and she was also blonde with green eyes. I would tell my grandmother countless times that I just inherited my looks from my mom's side, but she would just frown and roll her eyes at me. Anyways, I lived with them for a few years, except for the years I was at university. My grandmother fought so hard for my grandfather to not pay for my fees, but luckily I was awarded a full all-expenses-paid scholarship and became my parents, well, they were financially smart. They also left me money enough to get by in life. I studied marketing just like my grandfather had, and once I graduated, he offered me a job at his agency, which angered my grandma because, well, he didn't really care though. He felt that I had worked hard for it, which I did. I mean, I was the top student in my class and my final average was excellent. So, I've been working for my grandfather for about almost 5 years, and my cousin Jake also works there. My uncle works there too, but they do more freelance work for my grandfather. My grandmother has been nagging my grandpa to hire her granddaughter Amanda, but he's been refusing because she doesn't have a qualification, and she was also studying marketing but then dropped out to focus on her influencer career, which angered my grandmother a lot. Anyways, let me not bore you guys with too many back details. I was at work busy drafting a proposal for a client when my grandfather walked in with a huge smile upon his face. We greeted each other. He then asked how was my proposal going, and I told him that it's going well. He reminded me that this was a major client, and I won't lie, whenever he reminds me that this was a big client, I got even more nervous. My grandfather could sense my nerves and then proceed to hold my hand and tell me that he knew that I would kill this presentation. He told me that he believed in me and that he would not have assigned this client to me if he wasn't sure of my capabilities. I gave him a little smile and told him that I would not let him down. He then proceeded to tell me about the birthday celebration he was throwing next weekend. Yeah, he was turning 70, yet he was still fit and healthy. For most of the morning, we spoke about his birthday celebration, and from what he was telling me, it sounded like it was definitely going to be a big event. My grandfather loved throwing big parties. He believed that everything needed to be celebrated, so I wasn't surprised that he was making his 70th birthday a huge celebration. A few days later, I had presented my proposal to the major client. The client loved everything about my proposal and wanted to sign the contract immediately. I was so proud of myself. I just landed a major client for the company, and I've done it all on my own. I knew that my parents were looking down smiling at me because I knew that I had made them proud. Everyone at work was congratulating me. Later that day, my phone started beeping and my grandmother's number popped up on my notifications. It shocked me because she had hardly ever texted or called me. I opened her text and it was a message of congratulations, which did surprise me. I was actually taken back because she hardly ever acknowledged my accomplishments. She even told me that she was proud of me and that she loved me, which I found really weird. But it warmed my heart because it felt good to hear such kind words from my grandma. I wish I had not been so naive, because then I would not have ended up in the messed up situation that I'm in. I'll update you guys about it. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're enjoying your day. If you're not subscribed to the channel, take a second and hit that subscribe button. We do have multiple updates to get into, and this story is about to take a wild ride. Here's your first update. Update number 1. It was finally the day of Grandfather's 70th birthday, and he was hosting it at his house. Jake and I arrived together because we had agreed to use his car. The yard was decorated so beautifully and the food looked absolutely delicious, and I thought it was going to be a barbecue, but I guess he decided on something different. We found him busy talking to his friends and he looked so happy, which warmed my heart. I then noticed that my grandmother's granddaughter Amanda was around. I went to greet her and she greeted me back with a huge smile. She was busy on her phone and I asked what she was up to. She told me that she was doing a vlog. I then asked her how that was going, and she told me that it was going really well, that her following had increased tremendously, meaning that she was making quite a bit of money. I told her that sounded exciting, that she should send me a link so that I could follow her too. As she was about to reply, my grandmother interrupted us. She greeted me and then gave me a hug, which was odd because she was not an affectionate person. Even Amanda was a bit confused by her hugging me. She asked what were we up to. I just told her that Amanda was just telling me about her vlogging career. My grandmother frowned and then quickly smiled as my grandfather joined into the conversation. We greeted each other and then wished him a happy birthday. He thanked me and then proceeded to ask what we were talking about. As I was about to respond, my grandmother cut me off and told him that we were talking about Amanda's plans to go back to college. Amanda raised her eyebrow and I looked over my shoulder. My grandfather's eyes lit up because he was a very big person on education and believed that in order for you to be successful in this lifetime, you need qualifications. He told Amanda that he was happy to hear that she was going back to college. As Amanda was about to correct him, my grandmother interrupted and said that she was super proud of Amanda, and she hoped that once she graduated, my grandfather would have a job for her. So, my grandfather nervously laughed and told us that he had a big announcement to make. My grandmother looked at him weirdly and asked him what was the big announcement about. Grandfather ignored her and just walked off. My grandmother then asked me if I knew anything about this announcement, and I shrugged my shoulders and told her that I had no idea what this announcement was about. As she was about to ask another question, my grandfather was in the middle of the yard with a microphone, asking for our attention. Everybody turned around to face him, and we all moved close to him so that he would be able to hear him. He started off his speech by thanking everybody for coming to celebrate his special, that he was grateful that he had lived for this and that it was a blessing. He then spoke about my parents, specifically my father. He spoke about how he wished that my father could be there, but unfortunately everybody was really on borrowed time. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks, and Jake immediately held my hand, whispering that my parents are super proud and I should never forget that. I gave him a little smile and slightly nodded my head in agreement. My grandfather continued with his speech, and then he said that he had huge news. The news that came out of his mouth, it was really shocking. My grandfather announced that he would be stepping down from the CEO in just a few months because he was just too old to be walking up and down corridors, and that he wanted to spend his last years relaxing because he has been working hard for his whole life. My uncle yelled that he was happy that my grandmother was finally taking a break. He then announced that he wanted me to take over for him, but under both my uncle's supervision. I was shocked but extremely happy. I could not believe that my grandfather was leaving his company and his legacy to me. He then continued to say that since he was trusting me with his legacy, it was only fair that he appointed me as the head of his estate, meaning that when he passed away, everything of his would go to me. I couldn't believe my ears. He was trusting and leaving everything to me, and Jake looked at me and asked how I was feeling. I told him that I was in shock. He just hugged me and told me that I deserved it. So I smiled at him, and I knew that this could possibly cause my other cousins to be envious and also hate me, but I didn't care. My grandfather continued to explain that he wanted the company to stay within the family, because it was a family business after all, and since I was his only granddaughter, he thought that it would be best to leave everything to me. The celebration continued, and everybody was congratulating me. Well, everybody except for my other male cousins. They were just rolling their eyes at me and throwing daggers. I was overwhelmed and extremely happy. My grandmother came up to me and gave me a big hug. She told me that she was happy for me and that my grandfather had made an excellent choice and decision, which really surprised me, guys. She asked if we could quickly have a private conversation inside. So I nodded my head and we went inside. So I took a seat and she poured us both glasses of wine. She then took her seat and gulped down a bit of it, and she looked into my eyes and held my hands. She told me that she wanted to apologize for how she had treated me for all these years. She continued to say that it was never her intention to make me feel unwanted, but that once my father passed away, it was hard for her to even look at me, because I reminded her so much of him. I was shocked to hear her say that, because she always made comments about me not looking like my father. She continued to say that she wanted us to work on our relationship, because she knew how much it would mean to me and my grandfather, and that this was something my father probably wanted to see. She was right. My father had always wanted my grandmother and I to have a close relationship since she never got along with my mom. I also knew that this would make my grandfather very happy. I told her that I would love for us to work on our relationship. However, I told her that before we could start over, I need to know why she hated my mother so much. My grandma took a deep breath and told me that she never hated my mother, but rather she was just jealous of her because she had taken her little boy from her. She chuckled a bit and told me that I would understand once I had children of my own. I just nodded my head and told her, okay, I understand. I mean, my father was the last born, and as a baby he was very sickly, so it made sense why she was so overprotective of him. She told me that she would probably head back outside. So I nodded my head and stood up. She then asked if she could come over to my place tomorrow for our first bonding day, even adding that she would cook us a yummy lunch, which I could not say no to because one thing about grandmother, she can cook. Wow, how I wished I would have said no to that lunch. I wish I would have, because after lunch everything went straight downhill. Update number 2. Hey guys, I'm back for another update. My grandmother has just arrived at my house, which she was carrying plastic bags of food. I helped her carry them into the kitchen, and then she started setting things up. She unpacked everything in the plastics and started to cook. I asked if she needed help, and she took her head. She told me that this was her treat and that she just wanted me to relax. She then added that I should enjoy relaxing because once I take over the company, she won't exist anymore. Well, I won't be able to relax when I take over the company? I smiled at her because she was right. Being a CEO was definitely not child's play. I was busy reading a magazine while she was cooking. After an hour, she rushes into the living room. She looked frustrated and asked what was wrong, and she told me that she's forgotten to buy us wine. I told her that I had a few bottles of wine in my cupboard. She told me that she also needed this very specific wine to add to the meal that she was cooking. She then asked if I could quickly go to the store and get it, so I agreed to go get it. I quickly changed my outfits and I headed out to the store. I took about 30 minutes and managed to get the wine with also a very few other amount of things. When I got home, my grandmother was not in the kitchen. As I was about to look for her, she walked in there. She smiled as I told her I got the wine, and she thanked me and told me that I would love this wine. She finished cooking and we had our lunch outside on the patio. While we were eating, she told me that I've done such a good job taking care of my parents' home. My parents had obviously left me their house, and I've been living here since I graduated. We continued eating and talking, and she was telling me stories about my father as a child. Honestly, hearing these stories warmed my heart. I felt close to my grandmother, and I felt even closer to my father. As she was about to leave, I thanked her for coming over, and she told me that it was her pleasure and that we should do this more often. I smiled at her and told her that I would love that. I was busy telling Jake about my lunch date with our grandmother. I told him that things were finally looking up between us. He told me that he was very suspicious about her actions, and he told me that he found it weird that she was being all nice to me after my grandfather had announced that, well, I'm the head of the estate. He told me that I should tread very, very lightly around her, and that I should not trust her intentions because he felt that she had ill intentions in mind. I snapped and told him that he should keep his negativity to himself, and I told him to stop being jealous and hung up the phone. A few weeks go by, and I have not spoken to Jake since that day. But alas, my grandmother was ignoring my calls and messages. I thought that maybe she was busy. Anyways, it was the day of my grandfather announcing to everybody at the company that he was appointing me as the CEO. The media was there also because the company was one of the biggest companies in the state. I was busy socializing when I saw grandmother busy talking to a few ladies. I walked over to greet her. She rolled her eyes at me while she greeted me back, and she continued talking to the ladies, intentionally ignoring me. I was so confused. I was about to ask her what's up. But my grandfather called me over because he was about to make the announcement. Everybody was taking their seats, and grandfather was facing everyone. As he was about to make the announcement, my grandmother stood up and said that she had an announcement of her own. My grandfather looked at her annoyingly, but he allowed her to continue talking. She took a few pages out of her purse, and what she said next completely embarrassed and destroyed me. In front of everybody, she announced that I was not their biological grandchild, that my mother had an affair while she was married to my dad. She explained that the papers were from my mother's personal journal. She then also took a document out. She further explained that she had secretly done a DNA test by using a strand of my hair, and the test indicated that we are not related. My heart shattered into a million pieces because I could not believe that she was doing this to me in front of everyone. I looked at my grandfather, who snatched the DNA test from Grandma. He was scanning everything, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. I walked over to him and told him that this was all a lie. He shook his head and said that the DNA test clearly stated that I was not his grandchild. I told him that all of this was a lie and that we could go to a real DNA place right now. He shook his head, tears rolling down my face. My grandmother looked at me with disgust and told me that she always knew that my mother was a loose woman with no morals or values, and she called my dead mother all sorts of horrifying names, insulting her, and my grandfather did absolutely nothing. Jake came to my defense and told my grandmother to shut her mouth. She rolled her eyes, but she kept quiet. My grandfather looked at me and told me that I was fired and that I should never ever come back here, so I glared at him in disbelief and asked if he was being serious. He nodded his head and asked for me to leave, and that if I did not leave willingly, he would then have no choice but to call security. Jake told him that he should at least let me pack up my things. I shook my head and said that I did not need anything from here. I looked at my grandparents one last time and I walked out. My heart was hurting, and I've never felt so hurt and betrayed. My grandfather did not even defend me. He just threw me out like garbage, and that old woman had the nerve to call my mother such names. She was going to pay. They were all going to pay. Update number 3. Hey guys, I know it's been weeks since the awful day that I've been talking about. Well, yeah, I've been taking it day by day. My grandfather had really fired and cut me off. The whole incident was on the front page of the business news that day, and I was embarrassed. Even though I was hurt by my grandparents' actions, specifically Grandma, I was not going to let them get away with this. They'd tarnished my late mother's name, and they were going to pay. Jake was keeping me updated on everything that was going on in the company. He told me that Amanda has been hired to replace me. I was devastated and hurt to hear. I was in my parents' room going through their stuff when I found my mom's journal, the one that my grandmother ripped the pages from. There was absolutely no way my mother would have cheated on my father, and what I found very strange, I found her journal hidden in the bathroom cabinet, not inside one of the boxes. I read through her journal, and what I discovered, guys, it rocked my world. I knew my mother would have never cheated on my dad. It looked like my grandmother was the one cheating on my grandfather with her ex-husband. My mother had written that she saw them at this very secluded restaurant and that they were all over each other. She also wrote that she was conflicted about whether to tell my father or not, but the rest of the pages were ripped out. The old lady ripped out certain pages to give the illusion that my mother has been cheating. So, I called Jake and asked him to do something for me. I told him that he must do it discreetly and make sure that no one catches him. He agreed, and a few days later came to my house with the information I needed. I'd asked to get our grandmother's ex-husband's address, which he got from Amanda. One thing about Amanda was that she was a bit slow and never caught on to anything, hence why it's been so easy for Jake to get the information. We drove to Matthew's home, and luckily we found him there. He had no idea who we were, which I did find strange. I explained who we were, and he was taken aback. He told us that he had not seen our grandmother for a few weeks. He exposed that they were seeing each other romantically, of course. He then asked us when would the separation between her and our grandfather be finalized. I just raised my eyebrow and asked him what separation was. He told us that our grandmother had told him that she was going to leave our grandfather as soon as he hired Amanda. He told us that they've been seeing each other again for over a year now. Jake told him that our grandparents were not divorcing. He laughed and said obviously they cannot divorce. She was still legally married to him. Jake and I gasped in shock. He explained to us that our grandmother never wanted to sign divorce papers. She had told him that she was going to use grandfather for his money and that once she got close enough she would steal his fortune. He then further explained that the plan fell through when she, unfortunately, fell pregnant. He also told us that for all these years she's been secretly stealing money from our grandfather. I looked at him and asked him to back up the claims that he was making. He stood up and went to collect a few documents, and he showed us their marriage certificate, and indeed they were still married. He also showed us a bank statement that indicated that money was being sent into his account from our grandfather's account. We noticed that the most recent transactions were coming from the company's account. So we asked him about that, and he said that it was Amanda's doing. I could not believe my ears. I then asked him why he was confidently telling us all this, and he told us that he was tired of being a side piece. His words. He further explained that it was clear that my grandmother was lying to both him and Grandpa, and he honestly was getting sick of it. He also added that if grandfather's accountants picked up on this, they would accuse him of fraud, and he doesn't think my grandmother would even help him out. It was clear that Matthew had realized that he was just being used, and he was tired of it. I proceeded to ask if he would do me a favor, and he said he would do anything to take my grandmother down. He explained to us that she was the reason why he had no relationship with both his daughter and granddaughter. He further explained that she's been manipulating all of them, and that they were all part of her web of lies. So I asked him why hadn't he tried reaching out to grandfather. He told us that the chance of grandfather believing him was slim to none, and he would just end up getting all the heat of it. I nodded my head and told him that I understand where he was coming from. He then proceeded to tell Matthew our plan. A few days have passed, and I was at the venue where my grandmother was hosting a charity event. I walked into the event, and everybody was shocked to see me. My grandfather looked away, and grandmother immediately rushed over to me. She told me that if I did not leave immediately, she would have security escort me out. So I chuckled and told her that would be a bad idea. As she was about to call security, Matthew walked in with Jake, and she absolutely froze. Matthew rushed over to her, and he was calling her all sorts of romantic pet names. My grandmother had no idea how to act, so my grandfather asked what the hell's going on. As my grandmother was about to respond, I told him that I would gladly explain everything to him. So I proceeded to tell everyone, because everybody was watching, even the media, that my grandmother has been having an on and off affair with her ex-husband. Everybody was shocked. My grandmother yelled for me to shut up and stop lying. However, Matthew backed up my statement and confirmed that they've been seeing each other romantically. I took out the bank statements and Matthew had shown and gave me. I gave them to my grandfather and told him that Grandma's been stealing money from him and sending it to Matthew's account. Matthew told Grandfather that my grandmother had told him that this money was going to be used when she left him stuff, and he added that my grandmother had told him that this money would have them set until the day that they pass on. I could see my grandfather's anger brewing. I then told him that my grandma was still married to Matthew even, meaning that their marriage was not even existent. Matthew explained that my grandma refused to sign the divorce papers and his marriage certificate with my grandma was fake. He added that grandmother had hired someone to draft a fake marriage certificate. Matthew kept on exposing Grandma and all her evil tactics. My grandmother looked at Grandfather and asked him not to believe me or Matthew. She reminded him that I was not even my father's biological child. I laughed and laughed and laughed, and then I proceeded to take out my own DNA test. I showed it to him, and it indicated that Jake and I were related. Matthew then exposed that my grandmother had asked him to draft a fake DNA result. My grandfather looked at me and I could see the sadness and regret in his eyes. My grandma rushed towards me and proceeded to slap me. She was about to slap me again, but Grandfather grabbed her arm and told her that he was going to call the police. She starts screaming at me. She called me all sorts of insults, and out of anger, she confessed to everything. She even confessed that she has gone through my mother's journal and even ripped out the pages. My grandfather was trying his best to pull her away from me, but she was so strong. Jake had to help. She yelled that she had always hated my mother because she had threatened to expose the affair. She then exposed that the only reason she even went to my house was so that she could find something to use to destroy my relationship with my grandfather because she hated how close we were. She yelled that my grandfather should have appointed her as the head of his estate because she was the reason he was even rich. Someone had called security and they were walking over to Grandma. As soon as she saw the security guard, she back-kicked Jake in the stomach like a mule, and he immediately let her go. She tried running, but she was just too slow. She was screaming and cussing as they escorted her out, and everybody was in disbelief about what just happened. Final update. A couple of months have passed since the day Grandma went crazy, and a lot of healing has gone on. Firstly, my grandfather kicked my grandmother out and broke up with her technically. He couldn't really divorce her because she was never married to him. Matthew has been telling the truth because my grandfather went to court to verify the information. The court told him that there's no document with their names on it, meaning that grandmother had never filed a marriage certificate. He could not understand how grandmother has gotten away with this, but as we all discovered, Grandma was one smart, manipulative cookie. Well, after the charity event, Amanda admitted to my grandfather that our grandma had forced her to steal money from the company, and that was the main reason why she had always wanted Amanda to work there, so that she could steal more money. My grandfather decided to be lenient towards Amanda because of all her honesty. Also, we have no idea where my grandmother is. Once the security escorted her out, she, poof, disappeared. Even Matthew had no idea where she was, which was frustrating for him because he was now unable to divorce her. Unfortunately, my relationship with grandfather is still a bit strained, but we're working on it. He really broke my trust, and most importantly, he broke my heart when he did not defend me, and I was still trying to get over the fact that instead of trying to figure things out with me, he had immediately fired and cut me out, which hurt tremendously. He did ask me to come back to the company and take the CEO position, but I rejected it. Told him to give it to one of my uncles. The whole situation, it just inspired me to start my own marketing agency. I decided that I wanted to have my own legacy. Jake also decided to leave my grandfather's company and work for me instead. Sometimes I regret taking the action of revenge, because it revealed so much and it's brought a lot of hurt. However, at the same time, it brought out the truth. Even though my intentions were evil because I had wanted to cause pain to my grandma, It did bring a lot of peace because everyone found out the truth and now we aren't living in grandmother's lies anymore. So it just blows my mind that somebody can be so diabolical and just set on taking over somebody's life like the grandma in today's story was. I do want to know your thoughts about it. Say, for instance, you were in OP's position, and you were having to deal with these allegations and all this false narratives and everything that was bad that they were saying about your late parents. I mean, this was a lot to handle. My grandmother is demanding I give up one of my babies. I'm about to have twins, and my grandmother wants to take one of the babies from me. Let me explain why this whole idea came to fruition, and guys, you're not going to believe what I tell you about my grandmother and my aunt. Hello guys, it's very unfortunate that today I'm having to share my story with you. My own grandmother tried to snatch my child away from me and portrayed me as a jerk who could not even take care of my own kids. She's gone too far in trying to take away my baby and has scared me for my life. All this has propelled me to seek therapy, and in the moments I was supposed to be the happiest and take care of myself, I had stress and I had to deal with drama that nobody should have to go through. As a parent, I constantly live in fear that my kids might be taken away from me. I would also like to add a trigger warning as I'll be talking about my postpartum depression. I'm 25 and I'm married to Darren, whom I met at high school. At first, we were apprehensive and weren't ready for a child, but when I accidentally got knocked up, we decided to embrace parenthood, and I had told my family previously that I was not really ready for a child so that they'd stop nagging me to have children. My grandmother thought I was not fit to have children because of my reluctance to have a kid. She decided that I would give my child to her beloved daughter, my Aunt Lucy. Well, she gave Lucy false hopes that I would give my child to her, and she was desperate as she could not have kids of her own. When my grandmother found out I had twins, she insisted I gave one of my children to her. When she found out I was having one boy and one girl, she said that she wanted my aunt to keep the boy. I desperately tried to avoid them and keep them away from me. The whole idea of having my kids taken away from me caused me immense stress, and I've even had postpartum depression. After my twins were born, my grandmother desperately tried to take my boy away from me. She even offered me a big house in exchange for my child. When nothing worked, she filed a complaint against me, and Child Protective Services came knocking at my door. Thankfully, the officer turned out to be my friend and helped me. I proved my innocence, and now I've finally decided to cut ties with everybody for good, including my mother and my dad. I come from a family that's very close-knit, and everybody knows what's going on in everyone's life. Not that we all want to, but my grandmother is the matriarch of the family. She's been like that since my grandfather and her husband died. She had to struggle a lot with 3 kids since my grandfather passed away. My mom, my aunt, and my uncle were kids back then, and I wasn't even born. My Aunt Lucy was constantly sick as a child and a teenager, so my grandmother is excessively protective of her. Aunt Lucy and my grandmother are really close, but my mom and uncle don't agree with her ideologies and principles. They still respect her and want to keep the family tied together too. The 3 kids are all married and have happy lives. They all owe their lives to my grandmother, who survived and thrived through the tough times. My Aunt Lucy cannot have children owing to her health issues. She and her husband Robert have opted for surrogacy in the past, but have had 2 failed implantations. They quit trying to get pregnant through surrogacy and are now looking for other options. During family dinners at my mother's, a short while after my honeymoon, my grandmother asked me when I was having kids. I told her that we had not really planned anything and that I was still too young for children. We had a huge argument, and my Aunt Lucy said that she envied me for having a choice. Well, I was offended, and I left. We were all bitter for a couple of days, but we all got back to normal eventually. A couple months after the incident, I discovered that I was pregnant. The baby was completely unplanned, but I and Darren were over the moon about it, so I told my mom as soon as I found out. My mom got a little excited and told everyone in the family. Well, My grandmother called me up and bluntly told me that I should give my baby to my Aunt Lucy because I never wanted a child in the first place. I obviously expected congratulations, but her manner of speaking was so shocking and hurtful to me. I told her that I did not want to give my baby to anybody and that we were really happy and ready for a child. After the ultrasound, I called everyone to my house for dinner, including Darren's parents, and we were delighted to tell everybody that we were having twins. Everybody was overjoyed. My grandmother was extremely joyful too. She got up and shouted out loud that now I could definitely give one of my babies to Aunt Lucy. Well, the whole room fell silent. Darren's parents were not pleased, and they looked at me with confused faces. Darren's mother, Lola, took me to the corner and asked me what was that all about and begged me not to give her grandchildren away. I assured her I wasn't going to and explained the situation to her. I was upset over my grandmother's insistence that I give my baby away to my aunt. I clarified to everybody that I was not giving away my baby and told everybody to leave after dinner. My grandmother caused a ruckus and told me I was being unfair. My mom hugged me before she left and told me not to worry. I cried myself to sleep that night. My Aunt Lucy wasn't at the dinner, so she wasn't really aware of the news that I was having twins. She called me the next morning, and whatever she said made me furious. My grandmother had told my aunt that I had agreed to give her my baby. She thanked me and said that she was looking forward to adopting my child. She said that she would not even mind adopting the both of them if I didn't want them. I told her she was not getting my babies and cut the call. Enraged, I called my grandmother to ask her why she did this. She starts arguing again and said that I would not be able to take care of my babies because I did not want them in the first place. She said that I was too immature to handle kids and that I was being selfish for not thinking about my aunt. She said the biggest virtue of a mother is selflessness, and if I did not have that in me, I would not deserve to have kids. I told her that it was none of her business and that she was not allowed to contact me ever again. My grandmother even ordered my mom to come and talk to me about this. My aunt called me crying and begging on the phone to give her one of my kids. Robert called me too, telling me she's sick and that I need to agree so that she gets better. I told Robert that I could not give my baby to a sick woman anyways. I told them that they were asking too much of me. I was frustrated. They kept blowing up my phone and trying to contact Darren too. My mother-in-law was scared that I'd give in to them, and this caused a rift between me and my in-laws. Darren supported me throughout all this, but he was kind of frustrated. The stress that they were causing me was not good for my babies and the pregnancy, so we decided to take a big step and change all our numbers. My mom had also told them to stop for the well-being of the babies, and they complained and compiled as they obviously did not want to harm my children. My sister-in-law, Caitlin, planned a surprise gender reveal for me. Unaware of the whole drama, she called my entire family to the gender reveal. Lola gave Caitlin an earful about the invites, but it was too late to send them all back. They were all acting normal, and we went along with the party. We had to pop 2 balloons to find out the baby's gender. We found out that we were having a boy and a girl. It set my grandmother off, and she shouted that Lucy would keep the boy and she'd finally have a grandson. Everyone was so confused and my jaw dropped. All my friends were there, and the situation was embarrassing and annoying, and I left the party immediately and went home. Everybody else stayed for lunch, though. My husband and I completely cut ties with my whole family, including my mom and dad. It was hard for me to not support during pregnancy from them, but I had to cancel the baby shower I was looking forward to. All my friends knew of the drama now, and I could not have any more drama in my life. I missed an important moment of my life by not having the baby shower, and I really felt bad at the time. So, Lola was mad too. I finally delivered my babies, and my parents came to visit, but we begged them not to tell anybody that we delivered. It was a couple of days apiece until the word got out that I've had twins. I named my boy Tyler, and my girl Faith. My Aunt Lucy visited me with my grandmother and stood outside my house. My grandmother got cold, so I had to take her in. I threatened them that I would call the police. Lucy got down on her knees to beg me to let her take Tyler with her, and I told her I could not and that she should leave. In the process, she got hurt. She banged her head on the table by accident and she fainted at my house. My grandmother starts screaming at me, waking up my babies and making them cry. The whole situation was so hard to handle, and my grandmother forced herself into the nursery and picked up Tyler to hush him. She didn't even look at Faith and just rushed out. I tried to snatch him away, but I was scared I'd hurt Tyler. My husband looked after Faith, who was crying too, and I picked up the phone, called Robert, and begged him to get his wife and my grandmother out of my house. My grandmother would not leave without Tyler, but we somehow managed to take him away from her. I was devastated and completely shattered. The birth of my kids was already too much to handle. We were already having sleepless nights, and I was tired. Handling the twins was not cut out for me, but I tried so hard. My husband helped too, but it was just too difficult. We slept in shifts and somehow managed to make it work. I was dealing with postpartum depression, and my husband encouraged me to see somebody, so we hired a full-time housekeeper and a nanny. The word got out that I was having mental health issues and that we hired a professional help. I don't know how they found out, I really don't. I fought with my mother and accused her of telling them, but she swore up and down it was not her. I still don't know who's telling them, but I swear the day I find out, I'm going to ruin that person's life. Things were starting to get better, and we were recovering and getting the hang of the parenthood. My mom called me and said my grandmother wanted to apologize and just talk to me. Darren said I should give her a chance, and maybe it might reduce the stress it was causing in my life, so I agreed. But I was cautious. I left the babies at my in-laws' house for a short while and went to meet my grandmother. My grandmother spoke softly and politely, and she asked how the kids were, particularly about Tyler. She asked how I was doing and gave me advice on parenthood. She steered the topic and told me that I needed to have a big house to raise a child. I had no clue where the conversation was going, but she kept on repeating the need to have a big house with a big garden. We told her that we could not afford a big house at any time soon, and that the 2 rooms were big enough to raise toddlers. She asked me to come to an agreement with her. So, she proposed that I give my Aunt Tyler in exchange for a bigger house. She showed us the keys and the pictures of the huge house that she would buy for us if we just gave up Tyler. She said that I would lose absolutely nothing, and I still had faith, and I would really just have a big house. She also said I was allowed to meet Tyler and that they'd tell him the truth when he grew up. My grandmother had started speaking complete and utter bullcrap at this point. She talked about how I would save money on childcare if I gave one of my babies to my aunt, and she wanted it to be a win-win situation. This old jerk had old ideologies that I did not agree with. Darren and I just completely lost it. We got up and left, and this was the last time I wanted to hear from her. I gave my grandmother so many chances because she was really an inspiring woman. I was wrong about her. She's nothing but a jerk who likes things done her way and would even kill to have things done her way. My aunt was equally guilty of wanting somebody else's baby when they clearly said no. I can't believe my grandmother, who knew me ever since I was a kid, thought I would be shallow enough to agree to give up my child for a large house. We picked up the twins and went home. It was hard on me because my own family was doing this with no regard for my mental health. All my grandmother cared about was her own daughter, and well, my aunt is spoiled too. She has always gotten what she wants, and this time, when she was refused of something, she couldn't take it. I cried the whole night because I decided that I'd never talk to my family again, including my mom and dad, because I just could not trust them anymore. So, the next morning, I woke up to a rather loud knock on my door. I opened it up, and my friend Anisha was standing there with my colleague Noah. They claimed to be from Child Protective Services, and they said that somebody had reported me for not being able to properly take care of my twins. I told him it's bullcrap. They said that they were going to have to take my kids while speaking to me and my husband, and they asked us to cooperate to make this all easy. We listened to them. I knew it was my grandmother or Aunt Lucy who must have reported me, but I did not know for sure. So I tell Anisha the whole story, and thankfully she believes me. She still said I have to prove the allegations against me to be wrong, and the report said I was not mentally stable enough to be taking care of the children, and that I could not take care of my children myself without any help of the nanny. It was true that I was seeking mental health, yes. The whole situation was made difficult because my therapist could not speak about postpartum depression due to a non-disclosure protocol. Since Anisha was a good friend of mine, she agreed to help me. She confirmed that it was my grandmother who reported me, and I had all the proof that she was crazy and she kept calling for my child. I showed them the recordings and told them about the mental harassment they've caused me. Anisha and Noah also spoke to a couple of my parents and Darren's parents. The nanny also told them how caring we were. She told them the handling of the twins was really tough, and we were doing a pretty damn good job at it. Anisha said that mental health issues were serious, and that they could take my kids away, but she allowed them to stay with us. I was extremely grateful for her help. They said that they would make their report and they'd let us know pretty soon. A couple days later, the CPS contacted me and told us that our proofs were pretty solid and that the kids were in safe hands. But we still had to be observing by them, just in case. It was all so annoying, but thanks to Anisha's help, we did not get in much of a hassle. A lot of the things in the report were baseless and untrue. Nothing was proven against me, and I don't think that we should have much trouble in the future. The whole thing was extremely exhausting, and I could not embrace motherhood properly for the first few months. The overwhelming feelings of stress were the main triggers for my mental health issues. I was slowly recovering, and I did not have to see a therapist anymore. Faith and Tyler are now 3 months of age. They're growing up to be healthy and happy babies. I still feel bad about constantly being stressed throughout my pregnancy. For the first few months, I'm still not speaking to my parents either. My mom understands, but she really wants to talk. I want to talk to her too, but I can't risk trusting anybody when it comes to my babies. I want to ask you all a question. Am I overreacting by asking my parents to stay away from my children? Am I being too overprotective? I don't want these issues to last forever, but I don't know how to break the ice either. I'm just confused, and I've also got bad dreams about my kids being taken away from me. I hope all my worries eventually fade away. Thank you for reading this, guys, and I hope I get some responses. New mother suggestions are welcome. Kind comments only. Update number 1. Hey guys, it's me again. I'm here with more about my aunt and my grandmother. So remember how my grandmother wanted to give my aunt one of my twins? I've completely cut ties, and after that, they still tried to make attempts to contact us. We try as much as possible to protect our children. A lot of you said that I should let time heal the issue I have with my parents. So, I've decided to give it some time, as you suggested. I'm still pretty unsure about how I'm going to break the ice with them, and I can't just reappear in their lives and be like, hey! Yeah, I miss my mom a lot. The twins are fine, although taking care of 2 is both tough and really expensive. I met Robert at the clinic where I take my kids for their vaccinations. Robert let me in on everything that's going on with Lucy. He said that Lucy was not in good health, because of which it was impossible for them to adopt because they kept getting rejected. Lucy was getting desperate for a child, and she's been determined. My grandmother promised her that she would solve her issue and that I would give away my child so that she can finally have a baby. She was given hope, and then it was taken away from her, which made her mental health go down the hill. He said that he understands me and respects that I do not want to give away my child, but he also cares about his dear wife. Ever since I cut ties with my family, Lucy has been frail. She's not only suffering from depression, she's not physically feeling well either. The doctor said that she might not be able to survive, and my grandmother's trying her best to make her better. Robert knows she's not fit enough to handle a child, however, but my grandmother thinks that's the only way that she's going to feel better. My grandma's trying her best to make her feel better, and it's scaring me a lot because she's scared of losing her. They're both acting crazy. My mom and uncle have been arguing with her over it, but all of them in vain. She's pretty adamant that I should give my aunt my baby boy. I told Robert to take care of my aunt. I cleared him, and I cannot give my child to anybody. She's definitely not a sick woman, so I advised him to seek professional help for my aunt so that she can heal. I prayed that my aunt would get better and eventually their dreams of having a child could come true. My grandmother does not understand that I love my child as much as she loves her daughter. I can't just give away my kid. They're both completely nuts, and I was determined to keep Tyler away from them. I felt bad for Robert, though. My grandmother is the person at fault, and my aunt would still be fine if she did not give her false hope. I'm going to work pretty soon, and I'm both excited and nervous at the same time. What if I can't catch up again? I'm not really happy about leaving my children and going to work, but I have no choice. I also have a lot of trust issues. I'm leaving my child with a nanny, to whom we're accustomed, but she's still a stranger. Being a parent is hard, and Darren says that I worry too much. It'll be okay. He says that we would go to any lengths to protect our children, and I'm just really grateful to Darren for supporting me through this difficult process of pregnancy and understanding me when my family was giving me so much trouble. If my grandmother was not a narcissistic jerk, I'd have a much easier life, but now I have to live in fear of having my kids taken away from me. I still get nightmares about it. My husband says that I should keep going to therapy, but I assure him that it's all okay. The trust issues I have are for life, and sometimes I think that maybe he's right. Tell me what you think. Thanks for reading. Update number 2. Hey guys, this time I have a really major update. It's wild, you will not believe it. In the last update about my aunt and my grandmother, I told you that I'm going to join work again after my maternal leave. It's been tough for me at first, but things really started going smoothly as we came to a routine. With everything going on, Darren and I could not make time for each other, so we decided to go on dates and let my in-laws take care of the twins while we were out. One such night, Lola left the door open, so their dog took a pee. Lucy broke in and sneakily tried to take Tyler away. Luckily, the dog saw her trying to go near Tyler and Faith, and he alerted Lola immediately. And Lola called for help. My father-in-law contacted the police, and they were in deep trouble. Lucy was going to be put in jail for trespassing and attempting to kidnap Tyler. She agreed to take him away. They were going to put her in the psych ward, and we let her off because of her mental condition, but we had a restraining order put against my aunt, Robert, and my grandmother. I told Robert that if we were to drop the charges, well, then he would have to put her in an asylum or something, but do whatever it takes to have her treated. Robert agreed, and they sought professional help. My grandmother was so mad about the situation, but still thought I was a selfish person. Upon seeing this, everybody in our family cut ties with my grandmother. They blamed her for being the reason Aunt Lucy was in such a bad mental condition. They also condemned her for harassing me too. We sought legal help to keep them away from my children, but I wish I would have done some sooner. I don't know what I would have done if Lucy actually managed to run off with Tyler. Lola apologized for being so careless, but honestly, it wasn't really her fault. She still feels guilty about it, and I also found out who was telling my grandmother what was going on in my life. Apparently, it was my neighbor, who turned out to be one of my grandmother's club friends. My neighbor has beef with us because of our late-night parties when we got married. She complained a couple times, but we stopped eventually, and we admit it was our fault, but she did not have to be such a jerk about it. My nanny would talk to her and let her in on what was going on. My nanny is innocent, of course, and she thought my neighbor was just a nice old lady. Of course, I spoke to my nanny too and warned her not to tell anybody what's going on in our house. I just hate gossip. I wanted her to do something petty to take revenge on my neighbor. I ruined her plants while she was on vacation. Not just any plants, she had recently spent money on her garden and brought all kinds of rare, exotic plants to it. I even broke her garden lights and her gnomes, and no, she does not have a camera. She just has an intruder alert, which doesn't really cover her garden. She was mad when she came back home, and she would never find out it was me. I'm finally a little chilled out since I know that things are being taken care of, and my family's scared of the police, so they won't be coming around. I don't think they expected I would ever take legal action against them. I did not expect I would either. I'd do anything for my babies, though. To be really honest, I was panicked, and sometimes I feel that I might have overreacted. Darren assures me that my concerns are valid and that I did the right thing. I think things got a little too far when my aunt tried to kidnap Tyler, though. I'm still pretty traumatized about it. I keep traumatizing other moms, so I figured if I kept updating here, other people would have to hear my constant yapping and my weird stories about my weird grandmother and aunt. Anyways, thanks for reading. Thanks for the comments, I really appreciate it. Final update. Hey everyone, so people are asking, my twins are doing amazing, Faith started crawling early, but Tyler has not been struggling, to do so. He's trying though. They grow up so fast, and it really feels good when people I don't know really come out and support. I'd really like to thank you for all the support and making me feel less insecure. As I've mentioned, I've constantly feared that somebody would try to snatch my babies away from me. I contacted my parents, and it was easier than I thought it would be. Honestly, I cried when I saw them and spoke to them after so many months. They were ecstatic upon seeing the twins, and it feels sad that they had to miss major milestones for my twins, but it's all okay now. I really needed them, especially my mother. When I was new to motherhood, having her around makes things a lot easier, and her advice is really helpful. My mom revealed that after taking Lucy for professional help, there was huge drama. My uncle and my mom fought with my grandmother, and they fought over all the mistakes my grandmother ever made. They condemned her for being so harsh on them as kids and favoring Lucy. They said her bias was clear and that she was the reason Lucy was having issues. Now, my uncle and my mom don't talk to my grandmother. She called her children multiple times to apologize, and Robert confronted my grandmother and confirmed that he too feels that the false hope she gave my aunt really made her sick. My aunt went through intense therapy and had to stay in the hospital because she was harming herself. It was a tough time for my grandmother too because she finally realized that it was her fault. My aunt finally recovered and she accepted that she was too unfit to have a child. Robert, and Aunt Lucy decided they would foster a child after Lucy fully recovered. She would still have physical ailments throughout her life, and it turns out that she's showing early signs of Alzheimer's. I do feel bad for the poor thing. My grandmother was moved to an old age home, and she's been there permanently now. My mom and my uncle do plan on taking to her eventually, but for now, they're giving her the silent treatment. There's a lot of things that need healing, but I think things are slowly starting to look up. I really hope Lucy and Robert can foster a child in the future. As for me, I'm still living in slight fear, but my family's happy and my kids are happy, and that's all I want. Again, thanks for reading. The comments have really helped, especially the ones that advised me to go and speak to my parents. It really helped me gather the courage, so thank you. Sometimes we overlook just how crazy some of the people are in these stories on Mr. Reddito's channel. Today was not an exception to that rule. I mean, we're talking about a grandmother and an aunt who on more than one occasion was trying to come up with some sort of plot, some sort of plan, an idea to steal away a baby from OP specifically. Guys, could you imagine if one of them would have got their hands on Tyler and just ran away with him? Maybe even leaving the state or the country. There's no telling what somebody this, mentally ill can do. If you guys have ever been in a situation similar to this, or had a grandmother or an aunt try to pull a similar stunt, let me know about it downstairs in our comment section. My grandfather was the most amazing man I've ever met. My grandmother, on the other hand, oh my goodness, she's a nightmare. Well, She's in my life right now more than ever, and I'm going to share with you guys a situation I have myself caught up in with my grandmother, my cousin, and myself. This summer morning, it brought me the most disgraceful experience of my lifetime, which is significantly the worst that I've experienced in my life. And all this is because of my grandma, Bratty, who moved into our house just a few days ago, and after a few days of setting foot in our house, she forced me to provide her with the necklace that I was handed by my loving grandmother, which I've kept with all mine this time as a reminder of the love and care that I received from him. Well, her sudden action has left me with utter disgust and confusion as I'm not able to frame my further reaction. I could not possibly tell all those things to my parents, who've been turning against me by my witty grandmother. Here, I need the help of you guys to suggest a genuine action that I should adopt in order to get out of this situation that's been burning me from the inside. My name is Willie. I have no fear or shame to admit here in front of you that I'm a family-oriented person. Well, I've always looked up to my parents and my grandfather for the courage and compassion that I needed in life, though none of them are with me today when I needed them the most. More than my parents, my grandfather Drax was the one who used to be with me every single celebration and displeasure that I had back then. He was my solace from all the remarks and the punishment that I used to get from my parents for a significant mischief I used to do. Though I don't wish to sideline my parents, who have provided me with the right care and support for my entire life. They've always placed my happiness and requirements first, by ensuring that I got what I truly wanted, not caring quite as much about their own needs. And I paid them exactly well by following their lead and their suggestions in life, rather than dominating my own interest. Still, the bond that I share with Drax was something different. We both used to spend a lot of time together, listening to songs, playing in the backyard, and roaming in the park. He would often tell me stories and accounts of his childhood and early life, and trust me, they all felt so adventurous and fun to listen to that I would often find myself embedded in them while resting on his arm. He also had another granddaughter from my Uncle Martin, yet he always favored me more than her. This is possibly the reason that he gave me the traditional necklace that's been in our family for quite some time. It is nearly a few centuries old, and it's been passed on to every succeeding generation by the previous one. The antique necklace that he gave me was a real testament of craftsmanship, and had an enchanting design that had no competition with the jewelry available today. He wasn't really open about sharing this wonderful piece of art with me, as he was quite skeptical of my grandmother's reaction to it. The kind of relationship that I had with my grandmother, Bratty, was so different from the one that I had with Drax. To her, I was the one with extreme misfortune, and I was probably the reason behind all her troubles. That's what she used to think back then. Moreover, according to her, I was the one who killed my grandfather. It was absolutely too much. I mean, how could I really kill my grandfather when he died of a lung disease? All of her absurd thinking was because of some age-old practice that she used to partake in. She was probably some kind of fortune teller with some different works and more permanent lineage. Though her practices and knowledge were not quite adaptable in the 21st century. When technology is supreme, her findings and practices were limited to me. She got along quite well with the other members of the family, including my cousin Trixie. Well, when I was born, she tried every possible way to convince my parents that I would bring misfortune and misery to their house, and she tried to force her to give me away to some other family or actually leave me stranded. While it was Drax who stepped in between and willfully shut her completely. Bratty never ruled out saying of Drax about anything in her life. She never really visited our house until Drax was present. It seemed as if she was not really able to withhold him, or to say that it was difficult for Drax to get a hold of her for a very long time. Anyways, whatever the reason behind their setback, she always remained quite sterile towards my family in general, by which I mean my father and my mother. I guess the reason behind her dislike of my parents could be because they did not send me away. Her most potent wish in this entire time was to set my apartment from my parents. And I don't really get how she could possibly hate me so much. It gives me no pleasure to know that her hatred is not just limited to me. Rather, I feel terrible at the sight of how abrasive she is and how she's behaving with William, my father. It makes me feel guilty about being around them, though I sometimes think that her menacing behavior is only reserved for us. She's completely alright with my uncle and her all-too-ridiculous daughter Trixie. She readily enjoys living with them, and the way she cares for Trixie is just so overwhelming. Additionally, it's because of her extra love and support that Trixie has grown up to be so rude and abusive. I have a few friends in the city who share the same office with her, and they often complain to me about how awful it is. She's quite a person whom you would wish to bump into in a busy subway or an office floor. I met her a few times at some family gatherings and where I was invited along with my parents, and it was quite burdensome for me to stick with her as well. Throughout the time that we were together, she kept on blaming me for certain events that would happen, and well, to me it felt as if I was sharing the seat with Bratty. It would not be wrong to call her the latest version of Bratty. A few days before, as I was collecting my stuff for the workshop that I was going to lead in my workplace, I got a hold of William. She seemed all too worried, and the growing distress was clearly visible on her forehead. Worried about his abating health condition that he usually suffers from, I took it upon myself to ask him the reason for it. It was then that he disclosed to me that Grandma Bratty had planned on visiting our house for a few weeks, and she would arrive soon enough. As informed by Uncle Martin, I was suddenly reminded of the trauma that she had caused me from the beginning, and I suddenly paced up to move to my office before she arrived. I, though, sometimes do agree with Bratty and the fact that I do have misfortune. She was right behind the door as I opened it to leave. There she was, accompanied by Uncle Martin, who had been coming to drop her off. I wished both of them a good morning, and Uncle Martin responded quite well. But the response that I got from Bratty, as usual, was all so awful. She ignored me all of a sudden and quickly moved toward William. I was getting late for work and had really no time for the recurring drama that seemed to unfold. I was quite skeptical of her return to our house, as I knew that she really did not like living with us. Moreover, her demeaning and ridiculous remarks are taken quite well by my mom, Eliza, who has grown up with this intrepid attitude towards Bratty in the past few years. And I really think that is all too justified for her absurd thoughts and actions. Additionally, William did not entertain her senseless vocations anymore. Her thoughts of framing my parents against me do not have any effect on them. There might have been something that caused her to return, and I could not possibly get my head off her. I was getting back from the party that was hosted by the company with my loving boyfriend, who works with me in my office. I got a hold of Bratty, peeking through the window of her room that was in front of the road. It had been about 9 months of dating, and we two were quite serious about it. Though I have not told my parents about our surreal relationship, it wasn't that I was refraining from doing so. It's just that we haven't really figured out what we're up to. I was going to tell them about it, though I was backed down by the abating health of William that had persisted for some weeks. I was tired of the party and wanted to head back to my room for a quick nap. I was broken in half by Bratty. At first, I suspected it to be some of her ruthless, baseless remarks that she made about me. This time, her attitude was quite different from the one that she carried with her often. She now seemed all captive and attentive toward my parents, and asked me in a rather absurd manner where I had been all this time. My parents did not quite seem to underestimate and undermine my question, as they were familiar with my parties and other similar stuff. So I responded with the exact thing that my grandma was as well. It was then that she disclosed the news of me getting along with some guy in the car. I had not expected this from her. I mean, I saw her down there staring at us from the window, though we were just saying goodbye, nothing else. More precisely, we were not really involved in any sort of stuff that Bratty claimed to have witnessed. She told my parents that I was present in such an inappropriate position that it made her feel so ashamed, and that I was lowering the image of my family in front of our neighbors. This time, her words seemed to have some effect on my parents, who were willing to trust her this time, all because of her deceiving demeanor. Needless to say, my parents were taken aback by the fact that I was getting involved with some guy who they didn't know about. I've always kept the details of my love life quite clear with them. This was really hard for them to take, and their reaction was truly justified. It was, well, made much worse by Bratty, who willfully added other intimate stuff to it, making me sound all creepy. It was a victory for my grandma, who was successfully turning my parents against me. I tried to explain to them that I was going to tell them all about it, but I was not able to, and that I was just bidding them goodbye, that's all. Though my words had no effect on them, they were determined to frame their minds against me. And how can I possibly blame them for it when I gave Bratty a clear chance in this? My parents remained distant from me for some days, and it even hurt me to think that I had abused the love that they both bestowed on me. The situation was made worse by my grandmother, who was constantly framing their minds against me, and there was no denying the fact that it was all because of her very presence that such things have unfolded in our house. I was also growing skeptical of the sudden change in her demeanor that made her sound genuine and truthful to my parents. One day, as I was resting on my bed, I was called to the hall by my father, William. He sounded so enraged and concerned that I quickly headed towards him. To me, it occurred for a second that they had really forgiven me for the mistake, though her manner quite ruled out that possibility quickly. There were a number of thoughts bouncing around in my head that made me worry about it. I found Bratty standing beside my father as I reached downstairs. I was intrigued by my father, who asked me if I had been involved in drinking and smoking for quite some time. It blew me away that I had these questions from William. I had no clue that he was talking about, so I responded to him immediately by saying that I have never in my life taken a drink or smoked. I was broken in between by my grandma, who held some buds in her hand and pointed them towards me and asked me, "Then what were these buds doing in your room?" I had no clue what she was referring to, so I remained quite numb. She was trying to frame me for being indulged in smoking and doing other drugs, which I had never done, though it really stuck with William and Eliza, who were convinced by the deceiving facts and information provided by Bratty, used it to express their growing anger by saying that they have never expected such a derogatory thing from me, and that I've let him down and have despaired the love and support that they've offered to me. It seemed as if my grandmother was on a mission to set me apart from my parents once and for all, and I was not surprised by her actions, as that was exactly what she tried from the moment I was born. Though this time her actions seemed to withhold a clear result. I was in no position to say anything in my favor. I tried explaining to my parents that I've never smoked, and that I did not know where all the cigarette butts were coming from inside my room. They moved away from me and said that they did not wish to talk to me anymore right now. I knew that there was some hidden motive behind my grandma's actions towards all these things, and that she was on to something else. It was my sheer misfortune that I've been grabbed by her witty plans this time. though I was not able to figure out what her real motive was behind all these actions. Why has she really returned to our house, I question? It was on the morning of the summer, when I was sitting in the yard, when I heard someone being called out by my grandma. I was not able to frame the reason why she was calling me all of a sudden. I thought that she might need my help with something, so I went to her and found that she was waiting for me in my room, and was holding a small briefcase of jewelry. After seeing it, I remembered that it was the same one that my grandfather gave me, and the one that I had been keeping with me all this time as a reminder of him. Bratty was holding them in her hands and showed them to me, ridiculing me for having them. She claimed that they should not be vested with someone who was so unfortunate and evil in nature. Rather, they should be given to Trixie, who readily deserves them. Those words hurt me deeply and made me feel dejected. She quickly left my room and went to her room, where she had been living all this time. I was blown away by her surreal remarks and thoughts about me. I'm really perplexed as to what I should do to get back that necklace that I was given by my grandfather. I could not possibly talk to my parents, who are really annoyed with me and do not wish to talk to me. I need you guys to suggest a possible way by which I can move on from this situation. Update number 1. Hey guys. 2 days have passed since my grandma got hold of the traditional necklace that was bestowed on me by grandfather years before his demise. And I held this necklace with me for a very long time as a reminder of my loving grandfather. Bratty has significantly changed my life in the past few days since she came to live with us. She unfolded a series of witty actions and plans that left me deserted and disturbed. At first she tried to demean me and separate them from me. My parents, who loved and cared for my every thought, have ceased to talk with me. She held me captive for harming their trust by getting along in their relationship with a guy, as well for smoking and doing drugs in my room. My parents, who have sought to fall prey to her deceiving acts and have broken off all conversation with me since then. I was not able to get anything back to the normal situation where everything was. Thanks to the suggestions of you guys here on this platform, who advised me to make my parents aware of the truth that was there regarding my relationship and false smoking habits. The other day, I requested that my parents hear me out just once, and after much struggle, I convinced them to do so. I sat them down and told them everything from the beginning about my relationship stuff, and even made them talk with my boyfriend, who too assured them that we had not had an intimate relationship with each other till then, and we were just dating each other to get to know one another very well. After I gained their confidence in the relationship thing, I told them about the smoking stuff that was all made up by Bratty. They were quite convinced of me, as I told them that I never really touched smoking in my entire life, and I have no interest in smoking or doing drugs at all. They too were skeptical of Bratty from the beginning, but were carried on by my relationship thing, which was hard for them to take. Though they came to believe me after I cleared all those things. It wasn't really as huge as it seemed before, and after all, they were my parents, and they were going to believe me one way or the other. It was when I told them about the necklace that Bratty had withdrawn from me. They got really tense, and straight ahead they moved with me to her room. William confronted Bratty about the necklace. She was resting on the sofa when we approached her. She seemed to be enjoying herself quite well, and why wouldn't she do that after gaining what she really wanted? Hearing of the necklace, she began fooling my parents with another fictional tale of her own. She told my mother that I threw away the necklace in anger, and even abused her so badly that she could not gather herself. William took no time in recognizing her real colors, and asked her to give me the necklace back right away. She suddenly changed her demeanor to her natural one. I said in a rather unpleasant manner that she was going to give that necklace to the one person who actually deserved it, and it was none other than Trixie. She was determined to carry that necklace with her to my uncle's house, so William stopped me from pressing any further, as he did not want to trouble Bratty. He asked me to just forget about the necklace stuff, and I did not force her as well, citing her condition. Though it really hurt me to lose the necklace that had been with me for oh so long. After the whole drama unfolded, William went to drop my grandma off at my uncle's house, and he expressed afterwards that he could not possibly express how happy Bratty was when she reached my uncle's house. I suspected it to be because of Trixie, as I knew that it would have been her who would have forced Bratty to come out to our house and ask for the necklace. Though it wasn't really clear to me how she came to know about the necklace when it was only limited to me and Drax. Update number 2. Hey guys, 2 weeks ago, since it's passed, when my grandmother left our house and took with her traditional necklace that I received from Drax. It was quite difficult for me to let go of that necklace, which I've kept with me for years, and I still wonder if there could be any way which I could possibly get it back. I mean, come on, no one would say that it belongs to my treacherous cousin Trixie for all her abusive and absurd habits. Only Bratty could possibly think of doing so. As she shares a different bond with her, it could be the same that I used to share with Drax many years ago. He was so caring and attentive towards me, and I spent most of my best moments with him. I still cherish those surreal moments while laying on my bed alone. The other day, as I was getting back from my office after a tiresome day, I stayed with my parents in the hall for some time to catch some air. We were talking about some random stuff and enjoying ourselves when my father's phone rang in between. It was my Uncle Martin. I noticed that the reaction of my father as he was on the cell phone call, his reaction felt as if it was some grave news waiting for us. It was then William told us that we came to know that it was Trixie, who had been admitted to the hospital because of an overdose of drugs. And he was calling us to go to the hospital because he was not able to get a hold of the situation. We went there to find that she was critically ill from the drug overdose and was not getting any improvement in her health. Though the doctors were trying their best to get her out of danger, it was after they checked her room that they found that she's been doing drugs for a very long time, and all these things were known to Bratty, who actually supported keeping it a secret. Everyone there grew intolerant of Bratty, who was possibly destroyed the future of her granddaughter Trixie. She was the one who readily supported all her habits and demands that led her to this point. Though I was not blaming Bratty for this, I knew that Trixie was a spoiled girl. Moreover, if it was Trixie who did all these things, then why should someone blame Bratty for Trixie's misconduct? While I was waiting in their home with my mom and aunt, William was there with my Uncle Martin. After some hours of waiting, we get a call from William. He assured us that her health was improving further, and we thanked God for this and prayed to him to heal her quickly. I got a hold of Bratty in between, and she was assured of this news. Though there was something that was affecting her. I could sense the kind of discomfort in her eyes. She was readily worried about something, and that was troubling her from within. Moreover, she was not able to contact me in the eyes for whatever reason it may be. I guess that it could be because of the necklace that she got from me. After that, we went to our house hoping for the best and waiting for the drama that was about to unfold. Updates number 3. Hey guys. A week has passed since we got the news of Trixie having an overdose, and we were equally shocked by the news of my uncle and aunt, who clearly had no idea that Trixie was involved in drugs or other things, though they were quite familiar with her excessive partying. They had no clue about the drugs, though. With the unfolding events, everyone became skeptical of Bratty, who was a close ally of Trixie in all her misdeeds. So there's no exception to the fact that she would have known about it from the beginning itself, though no one really had the courage to speak to her about the following things. While I was thinking of the pity feeling that I noticed in the eyes of my grandma,
bratty, it troubled me for days, as I somehow got to know that it had something to do with my necklace. The other thing that caught my attention was the fact that Trixie got her hands on drugs when they were so expensive. Although I have not been into drugs, I still know they cost a lot of money. Trixie got back from the hospital after 4 days, and she was doing quite well. Her health was getting back to normal. Still, there were various answers that we all needed from her. She was being protected by Bratty, who asked everyone to keep away from her as she needed a bit of rest. Uncle Martin tried a number of times to get a trace of drugs that she had gathered from some unknown place, and every time she fooled him by saying that it was some random guy who offered it to her unknowingly. But I knew that she had been into drugs for a very long time, and this matter was not going to end so easily, as it was a crime to do drugs in the States, and an investigation was on the way. After days of searching and investigating, the police got a hold of the drug dealer, who was supposed to have provided the drugs to Trixie and all of her friends, and he confessed to supplying drugs to Trixie a number of times. The police got a traditional necklace from him that he confessed to receiving for her in exchange for the money that she owed him. I quickly identified the necklace by just seeing it once in the hands of the investigator. Soon I told my father about it, who confronted the officer, and he promised to give it back once the trial was over. It seemed that my uncle and aunt had no clue about the necklace. It was then that Eliza disclosed the whole thing about the necklace to them. They also became doubtful of Bratty and her involvement in this whole case. It was after much inquiring that she confessed to getting the necklace from me and giving it to Trixie after persuasion. She told me that Trixie got a hold of the necklace at some function where I had worn it. Though she did not really know why she needed it, she probably needed it to cover the growing debt that she had accumulated with that guy. She was sentenced to a year in prison for indulging in the use of drugs, along with a fine of $1,000 that she had to pay. All her friends were also sentenced to prison time, while some of them were caught twice in the act and sent to jail for longer. The drug dealer, though, who sold the drugs to these people, was sent to jail for a term of 5 years. I have not really thought that Trixie could get involved with the drug trade. Despite being abrasive, she was pretty intelligent in her studies and activities. It could have been because of the support from Bratty that she got to this point. My grandma, Bratty, was sent to the retirement home for all her support and actions in respect to the incident. She was equally guilty of supporting Trixie blindly without caring about the consequences. Her medical care and other requirements were also covered regularly by my uncle and my father. I've got to own my traditional necklace once again, and after the trial is over, I was united with the memory and belongings of my loving grandfather.
So, it turns out that the grandmother was even worse than we could have imagined. She was enabling old Trixie and allowing her to do this drug use, and it ended up with her in the hospital from an overdose. Guys, I do want to hear from you about this story. Maybe you've been in a similar situation, or you can just tell me what you would have done if you were in OP's position and no one's really believing what you're saying. They're listening to the grandmother, they're listening to Trixie, but they're not listening to you. How do you handle that? Walk me through it down below in the comment section. Like I said, I love to read all the comments, and hearing from you guys is awesome. So my mother, she left me at my grandparents' house to start some new adventurous life because, to be honest with you guys, she said she doesn't like me. She can't stand me, and she never wanted to have me. The problem stems back to when she was so young and she got pregnant with me at a young age, and she said she never got to live her life the way she wanted, and it's all my fault. Well, I never believed that. So I decided to take that and run with it, and I became a doctor. Very successful, and now all these years later, after I haven't seen her, she's crawling back, groveling, and you won't believe what she has to say. Before I start my story, I should give you a warning that it might sound like a tragic one. Well, unfortunately, I'm the protagonist of the story. My mom and dad had me when they were still in college. Because of my mom's sudden pregnancy, she had to drop out. Because of that, she's always used to curse my father, and when I was only 3, she yelled at me, saying that because of me, her life is ruined. My father used to feel guilty for her, and later he suggested she resume her studies and assured her that he would take care of me at home. She gets angry and accused him of using her the way he pleased. After that, my dad never opened his mouth regarding this. I would say that my mom has always been relatively childish and has never been financially independent. She was very reliant on her father until she met my dad and became reliant on him. However, just to please her and fulfill her demands, he was devout to his work. He never knew when to rest, and he was not academically brilliant enough to get an office job, so he mainly relied on multiple blue-collar jobs. When he was there, he used to show me his love and affection. But my mom, on the other hand, was ignorant towards me. She would stay on calls for hours and even make me live on chips and a biscuit for days. She would make plans to go out the whole day and convince her drunken friend to babysit me. One time she left for a daycare and forgot to pick me up. They had to call her late at night to remind her that she has a son who didn't get picked up by the end of the day. My father was unaware of all these things, and he used to drive trucks at night. And when he had to go out of state, he would not be home for days. I was 4 years old then? I was a sensitive kid. Being sensitive to people who are close to me has always been my weakness, and I've always used to get confused with my mom's behavior. Little did I know that she was cheating behind our back. She was cheating even before she had me. I started having suspicions about it when I was around 8 or 10. Mainly because my father was sick at the time, and she became wild. Because of his excessive workload, he never took care of himself and suffered from kidney failure and a heart attack. By that time, he had collected enough money to send me to college and was quite established. So it didn't financially press us when the doctor told him that he had to be in bed 24/7. I think my mother thought that she would be able to go out of the house easily to meet her boyfriend. And because of that, she convinced my father that she should start working as well. Even with low qualifications, she said that she got a job, and her work involved traveling a lot. My father tried to oppose to it by saying that I was still a child and he was bedridden, so she should be here at least for a few hours a day, but she didn't care about my father's physical situation and screamed at him by saying he's trying to prune her with wings her whole life, and she won't let that happen now. My father still suggested finding some work that doesn't require lots of traveling, and assured her that he has money to treat him and take care of us. But she opposed this by saying that he's so desperate to keep a maid. Why doesn't he just keep an actual maid with the money instead of her? He didn't have the power to say anything anymore. He was too weak to protest. With my father's gradual decline with the medicine, she became more wild. I was getting hints of these more frequently, but I was still too young to comprehend it. For example, one day my mother picked me up from school. She was waiting for me inside the car and was on a phone call. I got into the car and sat in the back waiting for my mom to finish, and I couldn't hear much since it was not on speaker. At first I thought she was talking to a colleague because the voice did not sound like my dad. It also seemed like she was talking to a kid, promising to drop her off at school next time. The call lasted another 10 long minutes, and then I heard the guy say, "I love you," which shocked me, and I hope I misheard it. My mom seemed tense and glanced at me in the mirror, then ended the call with, "I love you too." After hanging up, she claimed it was my father, but I knew it wasn't. My parents never said "I love you" to each other, and my dad had been bedridden for 2 years now, and they usually just argued often about me. Even if it was my father, I would recognize his voice. The call was not on speaker, but I heard around that time my father's situation was really bad, and we were mentally preparing ourselves to hear the bad news any day. He wanted to visit a lakeside resort with the family, as it was on his bucket list. He used to deliver things to the resort, and the peaceful environment it had was out of this world. He wanted to take us there for a long time because of the emotional pressure. My mother could not say no. While we were going there, I was sitting beside my mom, and I noticed that my mom was texting someone on the phone with the screen cover open so that Dad could not see what she was doing, and he was sitting behind him. I find this kind of odd, but I don't think much of it.
until I started to read the messages that she was sending. She was messaging some guy and having a very, very, intense conversation. I was too little to understand what this type of conversation is, but now that I think about it, it's really, really cringy. Unfortunately, just a few days after this visit, my father passes. I was satisfied with the fact that he could at least complete one of his wishes. My mental health had been low after that, but I also tried to control it as much as possible. I was mourning, and I was expecting my mom to feel the same, but she was doing A-okay. Little did I know my hellish life would be waiting for me, and it was being arranged by my mother herself. After long-term treatment, my father did not have too much money left. But whatever he had, he gave it to me, but my mom took it and said that I was too young to handle money. To be honest, I didn't know how money can impact someone's life, so I gave it to her without stressing about it much. After a few days, all of those suspicions about her were clear when she brought her boyfriend and their daughter home. Shock would have been an understatement for my situation. I felt like my life had turned upside down at that exact moment. The daughter that she had is older than me, and it's the product of her being the mistress of a wealthy businessman. She left them when she got married to my father, but she was cheating behind our backs when she realized my father would not be able to fulfill her needs. So, even though my mother said that her boyfriend would live in the house, I had not seen him for a long time. He's a businessman and is always going in and out of town. The daughter was just a mini-me of my mother, even meaner. My mother warned me that if I wanted to live in the house, I had to listen to them and shut my mouth. Our house only has 2 bedrooms, and when my stepsister came, she claimed my room. I asked my mother where I would live, and she said that she would try to make the garage livable. I protested and said that I don't need a room. Just let me live in the living room. The garage was completely separated from the house, and the door was not strong, so I was too scared to live there. I was 12. So you can understand that the fear was genuine. However, she did not agree to that because her daughter's late-night show-watching spree would be hampered if I loitered around in the living room. I was forced to live in the garage, and the renovation she was talking about never happened. I thought that was the worst that could happen in me. In reality, at least I was living there because when my boyfriend came, my life became worse. He thought of me as a freeloader in my own house and treated me like a slave, and I could not even utter a word against him because my mom was not on my side. Things escalated one day when somebody came to the garage after everybody was sleeping and threatened me to run away from the house. And being a scary cat, screaming was the first expression I had. When everybody came to inquire about what happened, he said that he came to find a saw in the garage and I got scared. This happened one more time, and I told my mother properly in front of her. But she just went on saying that he was straight, and even if he would never threaten me. After that, I was scared for my life, and thankfully my boyfriend probably got tired of my complaining and gave my mom an ultimatum by saying either she had to choose me or them. Of course, she would choose them because I was nothing to her. I never was. She was only keeping me because if she dropped me off at any of my relatives' houses, they would question her and curse her. However, the ultimatum forced her to drop me off at my grandparents', my late father's house. My grandparents are extremely old and totally rely on house helpers and my aunt. My mother knows very well that they're incapable of raising me, but she was just too blind to build her new family. She dropped me at the doorstep, threw my belongings out of the vehicle, and left without even greeting them. My grandparents welcomed me and raised me after that. My grandparents and aunt were all like my father. They apologized to me, guys. They did. And, well, after the apologies were being thrown at me, they just said it was for not checking on me after my dad passed and when I told them everything. However, I found a new life in my grandparents' home. They showered me with love and were more than happy to have me in their lives. I was living like a king compared to the swamp in my mom's house, and I appreciate my grandparents for the care and love that they gave me, and I tried to give my best by just being successful in life and taking care of them. I became a doctor, and my grandparents were proud of me. They recently passed away after living a full and peaceful life, and I was just glad that I got to play a big part in that. But recently, guys, my aunt tells me that she was in a grocery store, and guess what? She says that she actually saw my mother. She cut ties with me a long time ago, and I'd always heard that she had left the house we used to live in. Together to live in another state. And I was sure that she didn't have anyone to visit in the city except me. I was nervous because of that, and just as I thought, after a few days of that, my stepsister showed up at my doorstep. Thankfully, I wasn't there. I was working out of state, and my aunt answered the door. My sister introduced herself and said that she and her mom have serious business with me and want to meet. My aunt wasn't familiar with her face, so I turned her down, saying I don't have any sisters. She was trying to reason with her, but my aunt wasn't buying it. She announced that she would come again, and she left. She informed me about everything over the phone, and now I'm scared to death to go home. But if anything happens, I will be the first to update you guys. Let me know exactly what you would do. Update number 1. Hey guys, it's me. I'm here for an update. Guys, my assumption was right. But before I go into it with my update and tell you what happened, I should clear out the confusion that I saw in the comments. The majority of the comments were about my grandparents did not report me after I told them everything when I came to stay with them. Guys, they're old, and none of them were physically capable of going to court for this. Also, I had no way to prove that they were threatening me because I was getting emotionally abused, not physically. Some said that I should have stayed in the house as it was my father's. Guys, I forgot to tell you that we used to live in a rented apartment, and my dad was so desperate to please my mother because of her constant complaints that the house was rented under her name. Some asked why I didn't take the money that my father left me. To be honest, as I told you before, I didn't know the impact of money then, and didn't even tell my grandparents about it. Even now, I'm happy where I am, and I don't need the money. However, thank you for showing your support, and your kind words were helpful in seeing my situation from a positive point of view for once. However, let me move on to the update, as I'm frustrated with the situation and beyond angry. It's only been a week, and I need your advice. My mom's living with the nearest motel for a few days with her daughter, as my grandparents passed away and gave all their inheritance to me. I'm alone in the house most of the time. See, my aunt comes here sometimes, and I also bring friends here occasionally. The property they left me is huge, a 2-story stacker, and also has a lot of farmland in the countryside. I plan to use it for charitable work. The news of that made it to the newspapers even, and my mom had no idea about the farmland, but probably because of those newspapers, she saw it. She also learned that I'm successful. I'm a doctor now. I was ready for them to show up at any moment and shoot their shot, but they were being sneaky, for God knows why. And when they didn't show up for days, I thought they left. But one day I was working in the kitchen and saw an unfamiliar car parked in the road. Somebody was sitting there, but for hours, the person did not come out. My neighbors are busy people, and they have 4 children, all of whom are teenagers. Sometimes I catch them sitting in their cars and reading, so they get that alone time. So I thought it was one of them. But the incident happened for a few days straight, and that scared me because it felt like somebody was watching me like an FBI agent. Out of curiosity, I went out to approach the person, and it was none other than my stepsister. Her face changed a lot, and I could not recognize her until she introduced. She tells me that my mother has been missing me, which is why she's here. She said my mother is sick and cannot come, so she's living at the motel and wants me to go there. Well, I tell her I have nothing to do with her, and I didn't care if she is sick. Honestly, I told her to go back to where they came from, and I made it crystal clear that I want nothing to do with them. So guys, that happened yesterday. I'm curious what happened to her and why she needs me, but I really have nothing to do with her. By the way my stepsister was requesting, it made me feel guilty somehow. I was in a peaceful place and was living my life, but this guilty feeling is killing me, which is why I'm here. Did I do right by turning them back? Please give your honest opinion. Update number 2. Hey guys, it's me again. So, thank you for giving your opinions about what I did. It's been a few weeks and I just feel less stressed after reading your comments. Even after getting kicked out of the house so that she could erase me and my father from her life just to start a quote better life. I was still longing to see her. I knew that I had to live with my grandparents, but I hoped at least she would come to visit me. Whenever I used to miss my father, I used to think about the smiles he had on his face when we were on vacation at the resort. I know she was faking it, but from an outside point of view, it would, look like a perfectly happy family. I always wanted that. I always used to think that she was pregnant with me at a young age, which is why she hated me. But when I saw the daughter who was older than me, it was clear that she hates me just because I was poor. Some people were telling me in the last update that people change over time, and as they age, they realize that they've missed and tried to get back to them. I thought she was older now and she was here to apologize to me or something, so I was almost enticed to reach out to her and receive the apology. But before I could react to that, she shows up. The day I turned my stepsister down, my mother and stepsister show up outside my door. In the evening, I thought she was sick and couldn't come here. However, the first thing she said upon entering the door was, "So, you turned out to be a brat and can't even respond?" Well, the sudden accusation makes me angry, but I kept calm and asked, "Why are they here?" She suddenly changed her tone and said she's visiting this place because she remembered it and got sick. She requested to stay in the house for a few days till she gets better. I tried to say no, but by her acting, I was sold, and I allowed it. For 2 days, they were just living in the house, and I was expecting an apology or something, but it didn't happen. After I gave them permission, my mom seemed a little better, and there was no sign of a sickness. So on the 4th day, I asked them why they were really here. Well, that time they answered me all right. Apparently her boyfriend was, has a wife and children, and my mother was nothing but a mistress to him, which is why he used to live out of state most of the time and occasionally visit. But recently, his business has been going to a loss and he needs to cut down on expenses. So, you know what that means? He decided to throw them out and go back to his family permanently, and they had to leave the house when he sold it, and they're now basically homeless. I told them they couldn't live here and had to find somewhere else. I gave them some time to find a job and move out, and, I might sound rude to you, but to be honest, this is exactly what I wanted to sound like. They still don't apologize to me, and I probably would have considered keeping them longer. But their tone was so demanding, like it was my duty to keep them. So I gave them an ultimatum. I'm not really ashamed of it if I'm being honest with you. But I'll tell you about it in a bit. Update number 3. It's been a few days since my last update, and oh my goodness, I don't know how I fell into their trap. I really thought they were in need and fell for their lies, and it's true that they had nowhere to go. I thought that they only needed me so that I could let them stay. Some of you guys said that I should help them out. So I thought I would let them live in my house for just a few more days. But they had other plans. They refused to leave, and day by day, they started acting like we've been living together as a family my whole life. I told my stepsister that she has to find a job and get the heck out of here, but she was making no efforts to do it. So one day, I could not take them anymore and told her that she has 1 month to take her crap and get it together, and get out. But at the moment, their real motive was disclosed. My mother demanded with an angry face that she knew about the farmland and the fortune I had. She said that she saw it in the newspaper that I was about to give everything to charity, but she could not let that happen. So she had to come to my rescue, and I told them it's my property and she has nothing to do with it, and told them to know their limit. I told them she was lucky that I even let them stay for the time being after all that they've done to me. My mother got all defensive and revealed that as I have a blood connection with her and as her daughter is related to her, that makes me related to her daughter as well. And as she is my sibling, she deserved half of my inheritance. I didn't know what to say at first as I was trying to make sense of everything she was saying because her words were going way above my head. After composing myself, I told her that she was not related to me. I asked her why she ignored my pleas when I was being assaulted by her boyfriend. I said I let them live here from a doctor's point of view as she entered my house by saying that she's sick. And I just told them, as she was clearly in perfect condition, there's no need to stay here. I gave them 1 hour to pack up their crap and leave and gave them a warning that if they didn't, I'm calling the cops. My mom became speechless and left. Well, I don't know where they went after that, and I don't want to go and take care of them. I'm too embarrassed to let them into my life again. All they did was break me into pieces. As I can't take care of the farmland I'd planned to use for donating, as that area doesn't have a hospital, there's no way I'll give that to some egoistic jerk. I hope they don't create any obstacles in my donation process. Final update. Hey guys. It's been a month and I have nothing much to update, honestly, but I was just talking about a charity event and I thought you guys would be worried if it went smooth or not. So I came here to inform you about that. My grandfather always wanted to use the farmland for good purposes, and he was a charitable person too, which I became a doctor. Yeah, that's why. He was talking about giving the land away, but he ended up giving it to me before he passed. I think he trusted me with that, and I was determined to fulfill his wishes. To celebrate it, I invited my doctor friends to party. My mother came in and created a scene in front of everyone. She was trying to frame me as a villain. She said my grandfather wanted to share the whole property with both of us, but I cut ties with him so that I could have everything. None of our friends were sold by the story as they knew who they were. Even after getting ignored at the party, she showed up at my house the next day with the same demand. I told them I would call the police and get a restraining order against her. She went after I mentioned the police, and guys, after the donation event was done, she only appeared once to tell me I made a big mistake by giving away the property, and she demanded 40% of the house for her daughter. I had to get a restraining order for her to keep her away. Nowadays, I don't see her. I think about the failure that she did, and, after she left the city. I'm happy that they were not too harmful and that I could peacefully donate my property away. Well, I know what I did might make me look like the villain, but if you read my story, you'll know what kind of monster my mother can be. I was feeling scared that they would come back and harass me again, so for the first time being, my aunt is living with me. Again, thank you for being with me this whole time. Your opinions have been game changers. I'm thankful that I had you guys in my corner to solve this situation. But let me know, do you think I went too far or did my mom deserve it?
Guys, I want to discuss this comment because it got a lot of negative and a lot of positive reviews on it, but let me just read it to you. What your mother did was unacceptable, but I can't help but feel sorry for your stepmother. You still had grandparents, and they were your family, but your sister, she's nothing but a mistress's daughter. The only family she can rely on is your mom, and you know what kind of person your mother is. I feel like she turned out just like your mom, because your mother is only going to like her if she acts like her and stays always in her favor. She had no one to trick her into making the wrong moves, which is why part of me wanted you to give some of the inheritance to her, come on. But I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. She's not your business, and that way your mom single-handedly destroyed both you and your sister's life. Thankfully, you had your grandparents come to the rescue. So guys, the question is, do you think OP should maybe put herself in her sister's shoes and see exactly, if inheritance should be given to her? In my opinion, I think OP should keep all the inheritance to themselves. But hey, let me know what you think, guys. My grandma, she's the only one in the family that doesn't want to sell the family house. Guys, we just got a record-breaking offer on it, and everyone's saying, sell it, we need the money. But she's trying to convince us we grew up there. And yes, I understand there's sentimental value, but the house is falling apart, and the people that want to buy it, they want the land, and they're offering so much money. So we're going to have to do something about it, even if it's something sinister. My family history is somewhat complicated. I never knew my father. My mother, she passed away when I was 11, so I lived and was raised in the old family house. A huge 2-story home with a large yard, where one time, better days, the older people say, there were crops. Now it's just a useless pile of weeds, and I was raised with my grandmother. I call her Mom and her 2 sisters, and the 3 had quite opposite personalities. One was carefree, sunflowers, birds, puppies, and the other was very religious, making us go to church every religious Sunday. The oldest, Mom, was the grumpiest. She was always complaining about something, and on more than one occasion she had run-ins with her sister over silly things that she sometimes made up. Among the cousins, we would say that everyone in the family had argued with her at least once. Even the babies, and every time this happened, we would have the inside joke that she was, quote, recharging her batteries, since she lived on hate as her fuel. It was something that made us laugh out loud, but as a rare thing, not her, she just kept scolding the grandchildren or whoever was in our way. Many people wonder how I managed to grow up with her, and my answer is always the same. It was not easy. Had it not been for my other two aunts to balance the scales, I feel I would have ended up throwing myself off the second floor. It wasn't until I was 20 that I was able to get out of there, move out of state, and live in a residency to study, and I did it for a long time. I graduated later than I thought due to various factors, and in the meantime, one of my grandmothers, the religious ones, passed away. It was a very bitter time, but nothing compared to only 6 months later, when my other grandmother, the chill one, followed the same path. They were perhaps the grayest years of our lives because she was the opposite of Mama. Cheerful, friendly, talkative, and playful, more so than any of us. But despite what one might think, Mama was not affected by this in the least. Oh, the contraire. She decided to look on the bright side of the situation and thought that now she could have a little more peace and quiet, without her sisters who might be nagging her. Although it sounds very abrupt and she never said it explicitly, I feel it was like that. I don't deny that she's sad and suffers inside. We're talking about her two younger sisters leaving before her, but after all this, I'm telling you, she adopted a more stoic attitude and closed up with everyone in the family. When we spent the holidays at the old house, she was the member who felt the least present, even though she was the primary resident. Her nieces, her nephews, and grandchildren tried to cheer her up, but it was all to no avail. All she wanted was to be left alone, complaining about the plumbing, the porcelain tiles, the quote ceiling that's about to fall in, don't you see it, and not answering messages, and that's why I've come to write this to you guys today. So, let me explain. I work in a construction company. We're in charge of evaluating spaces and organizing everything for remodeling or even home construction. A service that, although it may not sound like it, it's usually very profitable since those who pay for the service are usually people with great economic wealth. That's why I've managed to meet a lot of influential faces in the area, waiting for a golden opportunity like the one that happened to us. I met a businessman, let's just call him Ferguson, who knew of me from my family house, being one of the most well-known places in the area. He told me he was a little embarrassed to come out of the blue to the house to give his proposal, so meeting me was a pleasant surprise. He just asked me if, we weren't interested in selling the property, which encompassed a not-so-inconsiderable amount of acreage. I told him that we were not currently in the consideration, although the house was only being occupied by our grandmother, who had no plans to move either. It was then that the negotiations began, and the first proposal that he gave us was not humble at all. It was a lot of zeros, that's all I can say. He said that for years he's been looking for areas in the state that were perfect for creating industrial plants. He specializes in agriculture and natural products and, having scopes that allow him to have a national or even international projection. Anyways, he asked me to talk about it, but I told him that only my grandmother lived there and that I would talk to her about the proposal. Everything went wrong with that, and when I told her about it, Mama just said, over my dead body, some son of a gun will have and own this land. I grew up here. I raised your mother and my nieces, saw grandchildren born here, and they all slept in the same room at some point in their lives, so I'm not interested in his stupid offer. I'll leave you a copy of how the conversation I had went with her. I told her that she's always complaining about the place. From the amenities to the structure of the house, why not take advantage of it and let Mr. Ferguson buy it? He's offering us too much for what is old of a ranch. To which she said, Ranch? Watch your mouth, boy. A house is priced, but the home is not. I don't care if he offers me $1 billion. I'm not moving from here. Besides, where would I live next? At the house of one of our uncles or aunts. Indeed, I might even take you into my own home. These were big words since I wasn't looking forward to having her back by my side, but believe me when I tell you that the figure they were offering us was very tempting. She still said no. So I asked what would happen if my aunt and uncle said that they did want to sign over their parts to Mr. Ferguson. She said,
They would be wasting their time because it simply would not matter because my sister never left wills, and anyways, being the oldest, I'm the sole owner of the home. Mama, please, that money can be divided amongst the whole family. You know my cousin Sharon just gave birth to a baby boy, and they could use that extra money. What's more, if you want, you can have half of it. For that very reason, you say you're the major owner.
Ugh, but silly boy, aren't you getting it? This is not a question of money, it's a matter of principle.
Principle of what? If you just keep complaining that someday the roof is going to fall on you, and wouldn't that be pretty, would it? No.
Oh, that man just wants money by polluting the world.
Well, I won't say she's entirely wrong, because even the most eco-friendly farm has several cows that can cause as much more damage to the ozone layer than a pipe that blows smoke. Well, I was already warming up to the conversation. I was getting absolutely nowhere. It was like talking to a stone wall, a very whiny, senile one. I've wanted to talk about this with the family, but I feel that if I do, everybody will come down on Mama. And although it hurts my soul, she's the one who has the final say. I think the second most bitter and difficult part of all this is telling Mr. Ferguson that the house is not available. I thought he would be saddened, raise the offer, or consider looking elsewhere, and from what I could understand from our last conversation, I may not be surprised that he's already considered it. He hasn't said anything yet, and I haven't been past the startup report. At least not from him, but to have left the opportunity slip away, it seriously makes me feel terrible. I could suddenly agree with Mom and not sell the house because of the emotional and family aspect. If she didn't always complain about everything, it's so repetitive and stupid. She carried this fighting on about everything in somewhat internal of a way, but when it already affects the rest of the family, it goes to a more serious level. I don't understand how a woman with, quote, years of wisdom and experience can become so obtuse. To be honest, I'm about to call a family meeting, an intervention of sorts. What do you think? Well, what I fear is that of all the family members, I'm the closest to her. Not even my aunts and uncles are that close, and if I can't have an effect, they won't move a finger on her. I'm just sure I'll cause up a stir in the family, but it's not my fault that women is so stubborn. My Uncle Bill is a lawyer, and I'm sure that he can help us devise a way that we can beat Mama to the punch. With the money, the grandkids can go to college, and if Mama's so concerned about comfort, she can buy a small apartment with it. That way she doesn't have to climb the stairs and leave rooms going dusty, which is what's happening to the house. The place is deteriorating precisely because she's not taking enough care of it. The structure's not designed for one person. It's not even designed for 4 or 5. It's an old building. It has 8 rooms, 2 bathrooms downstairs, 1 upstairs, and another one in the form of a hut outside. The kitchen is huge, and it even has a vegetable patch. Tell me, what can a 75-year-old woman do with a vegetable patch? The answer is, ruin the possibility of helping the family and spoil a good place to live. Or at least produce... Well, I think I've written too much already. I'll write you guys in another week or so with some more updates, but I hope with all my heart that Mama just comes to her senses by then. Even if I have to nag her every day until she comes to her senses, I will. Update number 1, 1 week later. Gosh, I'm so tired. There was a meeting that we had with almost the whole family. No, rather, we were all there because even my aunt, who is on the other side of the country, was able to contact us via video call. Talking about the house. That's right. I told them about Ferguson's proposal, and everybody was stunned both by the amount of money Mama was turning down and the fact that she had not told anybody about it. So that's why I rounded up all the older members of the family. 2 uncles, 3 aunts, 13 nieces and nephews about, and me. All criticizing Mama's poor financial decision. She had first told everyone that she was not going to be a part of the discussion and that they were just wasting our time. And that was partly true because they did not say anything that I had not repeated before. The only one who sided with Mama was my aunt, who made the video call. According to her, Mama has every right to refuse, and it was the other grandmother's problem that they had not made wills, so their children were in the majority and having the power. We seemed to be in a bottomless pit. But everything got even more complicated when Uncle Billy mentioned property rights to direct heirs. And I don't know what else in case there was no formal documentation from all the parties involved, those who remain de facto owners. That was precisely the same method that was used for Mama and her sisters when their parents passed away. They became de facto owners of the house with no paperwork involved. However, we were dealt a crushing blow by Mama herself, because apparently one day after I told her about the house, about a week ago, she calls her lawyer and they formalized the document, spoiling the only alternative that we had left. The old lady beat us to the punch. She managed to be more astute and was able to foresee our move. When Billy read the document, she said that unfortunately everything was in order, so she could say that she was the only owner of the house. Her word is law. Well, I feel we no longer will be able to enjoy the proposal, and what's worse, Mama got so mad. She said that since we like money so much and are leaving our home, she would be renting out the backyard and events and such. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. The way she wants to execute it is just terrible. She would only do it for people she knows and is interested in, something that's already in very short supply. Then she talked about fees for backyard usage, and believe me, it's not worth it. For a place covered in weeds and not being taken care of, please. Everyone in the family ended up getting mad at her to the point where they started removing the other grandmother's things. And even I, partly due to social pressure, removed the rest of my stuff as well, without even thinking about how I was going to arrange it inside of my apartment. Well, we left the house much emptier than before, and now it went from being a family place to just a bunch of empty rooms. Seriously, what has to happen for Mama to realize the mistake that she's making? And with the part of the family on her side, all they do is further entrench that stubborn thinking. Oh, something I had forgotten to comment on other than that. One of my cousins was about to be able to get married, using that backyard of the house on site for the party, but because of all this that's happened, decided to cancel the ceremony and pay for a site on the other side of town. Well, Mama, she even insisted that she could do it there, but we felt it was more for the fact that by having the party there, the backyard would be mowed, and so she would take advantage of having the place cleaner. The woman may be old, but wise at the end of the day. I talked a lot with my cousins about what would happen, and they told me that the best option was to wait for nature to take its course. Well, that is, wait for Mama to kick the bucket, so we could get the deeds to the house, and I know it sounds cruel, but it's the best thing that we can do. The thing is, Ferguson will lose interest in it, and I doubt very much that we'll manage to find a good offer as one that he's already made. One of my cousins even came up with the idea of unliving Mama. Yeah, although that's a very off-color joke, I know more than one fantasized that that day would come, when we could finally have the house. But now I ask, is it wrong for us to behave like this? I mean, the whole family's being driven by a purely monetary interest, without considering that the house has been with us for, I don't know, more than a century? If we put it into a romantic aspect, it's sad. But that's how the world works, and if we can't take advantage of it, good for us. I don't think that after this situation, many will feel like talking to Mama anymore. Taking our stuff out is a symbol to tell her, sorry, old lady, we don't want to have anything to do with you. And I wonder if she'll be affected by this new loneliness. If she did not with her sisters, I doubt very much that we're on the same wavelength. Anyways, I'll update you guys. Update number 2, 3 months later. Well. If you only knew the change of events that we had in such a short time, and all coming from the cause of the family woes. Mama wrote me about a week ago, saying that she wanted to talk to me. It was the first time I've heard from her directly in quite a while, as I told you. Everybody lost track of her after the problem, with the house happening and whatnot. She asked me to visit her for something. And from the beginning, I thought it was to ask me for a favor or something like that, but she just assured me no. and like a fool I believed her, and that if possible I should come the next day. Well, as I don't like her bossing me around, I told her it's going to be a few days. After a little discussion, as usual with her, we arranged a visit, where she received me without coffee or even a glass of water. Despite the fact that I'd lived there for so many years, the house had a very powerful smell, of storage. It was as if upon entering you were greeted by a row of dusty house film. It was almost impressive how dilapidated the house looked from the last time the family was there. She invited me in and got right to the point.
Look, I know some things have happened since the last time we spoke, but I plan to at least enforce the decision I've made. What do I mean? Well, you guys got me so upset about selling the house that I decided to do something for myself. I'm going to renovate it. I want to put in new wood, new varnish, remove many of the old decorations and buy some new ones. Oh, and I'd like to be able to put the greenhouse station back into circulation. I feel I can get a few extra dollars out of it. Also, I want to modify the roof, since it's no lie when I say it's going to fall on my head one of these days. Other than that, it would be nice to put one of those movable chairs on the stairs to serve as an elevator for me. These legs of mine are killing me, and I have to sleep in the lower room because I can't stand the pain of going up more than 5 steps. Did you know that the other day it took me almost half an hour to go up and down to the 2nd floor? No, of course you wouldn't know that, because you never call her right. That phone of mine already looks like an ornament. Only Lois and her boys ever write to me, and they make video calls. What bad video calls? Everything's blurry and the internet connection is lousy.
She starts telling me so much, but so many things about the house, about her, and it seemed a little rude to have to interrupt an elderly woman, but I had to because really it's been about half an hour since she started talking, and frankly, I just seriously did not want it to get very late. When I remarked that it was getting dark, she took it as a cue to continue with another part of the conversation, saying,
Yes, the lights have to be fixed too, because, the lighting system, it looks like I'm living in a cave after 8 o'clock at night.
Blah, blah, blah. Actually, with a lot of pain, I had to stop her and ask her why I was there, and what she said.
Oh, I thought you knew. It was for you and your friends to help me with those repairs. The ones in the construction business.
I had to work up the courage not to correct her so rudely. I told her that my job was with a construction company and that those friends were actually my work colleagues. I asked her for more details and asked if she had enough money to cover all the demands that she was telling me, since there were many, and by the looks of it, they were quite expensive. What she said to me made me burst into a fit of laughter and rang through the house. "Money? Can't you do those small repairs I told about?" Small? The woman was talking to me about basically creating a new house from scratch, guys. Changing everything from the walls to the ceramics to the woodwork, expecting me to put almost 30 workers to do something out of goodwill. Like eat charity, I guess. I laughed quite a bit and she scolded me for that. But I told Mama that was impossible since it was such a high expense. She herself said that she was going to buy new decorations with some money that she had. So I asked her about the money. She told me that it was a retirement compensation, but it was not enough to remodel everything. And she thought that asking me for it would be more than enough to get her dream house for free. The only justification she gave me for being able to help her was because, quote, I was basically her son since she was the one who raised me and gave me a roof over my head. But I told her that was not the case. She should know what she caused a few months ago for the whole family. How we lost a golden opportunity because of her, and how ironically accepting that offer could have made her home from scratch, keeping most of the money Mr. Ferguson offered us. She's to no one's surprise getting upset. She scolded me and started arguing as well, calling me ungrateful. That after the solemn promise she made to my mother to take care of me. This was how I was repaying her. I told her that she was not the only one who raised me, but that my other grandmothers were there for me too, to help me and value me unlike her. who only cared about her selfish interest. And now, after she let the whole family down, she has the nerve to ask for things for free. But I did not decide to just stand there. No, I told her. Sure, with all the pleasure in the world, we can help you, but for that we need better machinery. And pay the guys for the whole day, and I could give you that with the money that I would have got from the sale of the land. But unfortunately, we don't have enough of a budget, so sorry, not sorry. She looked at me with the most hateful of faces anybody could have had. She told me to leave and not to come back. So I told her that she had only two choices left. Either sell the house to somebody else, since Ferguson's offer had already expired, or just die there. Well, she went silent, reflecting on everything that's happened. Not every day somebody from your family says something so powerful to you. She told me that she was going to sue me, that she was going to get the lawyers to throw the biggest lawsuit in the world at me, and I told her that if she had the contact book on the second floor, then I could sleep soundly that night. Well, I ask you, dear readers, was what I said wrong? I feel that it was not. I've already told some of my cousins and some of my uncles, and they agree with me. One of them even said, "Phew, finally someone stands up against that woman. Bravo, boy." And he starts to toast me with wine. You could see the resentment that they all had towards her, but I, on the other hand, I felt somewhat relieved to be able to take revenge on her. You know, her stubbornness cost me and the rest of the family and herself dearly. Maybe this way, she can repent for all that it cost us and have more time to be at peace with herself. I left with my head held high, feeling, that people get what they deserve after a lifetime of complaining and inconveniencing others. As much as it pains me to see an older woman suffer inside the house, I do have to remind myself now and then that she was the one who condemned herself to be in that coffin that she's in for the rest of her life. Final update. 1 year later. Wow, it looks like it was a whole life ago when I used to write here. How you guys been? Oh, on my side, I came to tell you the end of the story of my dearest mama. The last time I wrote you, I told you that she shamelessly asked me to fix her house together with my colleagues at the company where I work because I told her what I told her, and she did not have a good time. She swore that I was going to help her all because of the obligation or pity that I was going to have for her. Well, she's wrong. For days she tried to communicate with me either directly or indirectly with the help of family members, but when I told them about what she told me, they all agreed that she was just a freeloader. Even the part of the family who lives on the other side of the country said that Mama has reached a new limit. But as they say, to each one will come his or her reward or punishment. And for Mama, it was the falling ceiling. Ironic. Because it was that she said this was a lifetime ago, that the ceiling above her was going to fall, and whose fault was it? She said ours for having removed things that made the space more stable. She was accusing us of something that happened months ago and that she knew for a fact was her fault. I didn't even bother to talk to my colleagues as such an offer would be serious mockery to us. And I'm 100% sure that she's suffering right now, because without the roof, she had to rely on some neighbors to cover the empty rooms, having to cover them with plastic and sheets. It's sad, because that was the room for many of us in the family, but she cries about it, and I haven't told you about what she did. She called up Mr. Ferguson, which has been dubbed the most awkward phone call of the year. She called him up to ask about the offer on the space that he wants to buy, and well, he told her that he's already bought other territories, but that he, had been done at the time, and he would have very, very possibly increased the offer, and it would have been even better for us if I didn't say no. Mama no longer had a face to look me in the face. That's why she decided to give the territory to the state. Ended up giving her compensation and a small amount of money that was not even enough for a small motorcycle. If we can learn anything from this story, guys, it's, analyze decisions carefully and think about what's best not only for you, but for everyone around you. Mama surely learned it very well. Now living in a small house on the outskirts of the city, farther away from where she was, with only one floor and ceramics being a fourth-rate detail. If you ever read this, Mama, I want you to know that I love you.
But you were the one who got yourself into this big old disaster.
So guys, today's story, it was heart-touching. There was a lot of things going on with it. I do want to ask you guys one simple question. Do you agree with the grandmother of today's story who simply didn't want to sell it? Well, she wanted to die in that home. She wanted everyone just to realize, hey, this is where we grew up. But at the same time, I can see everyone else's perspective, and I don't necessarily think that they were greedy. A lot of the comments were pointing out that they're greedy, they just want the money, and they don't care about grandma's feelings. But they have to realize also the house was falling apart. They were desperately in need of money, and this could have bought grandma a brand new apartment. So I do want to know your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. Let's talk about it down below in the comment section, guys. My grandmother is such a racist. She refuses to even talk to my mother. Why? Because my stepmother is Chinese. Even though I've always looked at her just like my real mom, she's always been there for me. It doesn't seem to matter, because grandma, well, let me explain why she hates her so much.
Hello everyone, my name's Jules. I live with my father, Keith, and stepmother, Gemma. Gemma has 2 kids of her own from her previous marriage, Kit, 6 years old, male, and Mina, 5, female. My dad got divorced from my mother after she abandoned us a decade ago. He recently met Gemma, who had recently split with her own partner. They soon started dating, and instead of waiting, got married within 2 years. So I would have a mother, and Kit and Mina would have a father. I've always gotten along with Gemma. She's a sweet woman who doesn't talk much, but always tries her best to be there for me when I need her. My dad always loves his stepchildren a lot, and always shows up at their events. They even call him Dad, and I get along with Kit and Mina just fine too. They were too young when their mother married my father, so they thought and acted like I was their biological sister, even though they were aware that I was not. I treat them the same. At the age of 14, I had 2 siblings I've never had, and I was thrilled about it. When it was revealed that my dad was marrying a Chinese woman with 2 half-Chinese kids, it did not go over well with the family. So, my dad and Gemma got married in court to avoid issues, and my grandpa was ecstatic that he was glad that his son would not be alone forever, and the fact that he liked Gemma did not hurt. He warmed up to Kit and Mina soon as well, and he would put them in his lap and bounce them every time that they were over. I mean, not like letting anyone take away his experience of being a grandpa to toddlers one more time. He would sit with the kids in front of the fireplace and tell me how I was as a baby. My grandma did not have the same reaction. She did not like Gemma, and definitely wanted nothing to do with Kit and Mina. She wouldn't even acknowledge their presence when we came over, and she would avoid all of Gemma's advances in getting to know her. But she would pointedly spoil me in front of the step-siblings, which made me really uncomfortable. Sure, Kit and Mina were too young to understand, but Gemma saw through it, and so did my father. Dad and Grandma had many arguments, and Grandma would act like she did not understand what Dad was even talking about, leaving Dad even more frustrated. She would often physically hit Kit and Mina if they got something wrong, which infuriated Dad. She had never hit him as a kid and was furious for having the audacity to hit the kids just because they were half Chinese. However, they are old enough to notice that their grandma does not play with them or even talk to them when they try. Once, Kit asked me why Grandma didn't play with them, and I didn't have a good answer. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, and explaining racism wasn't something I could do at that age, so I tried to make it up to them. I play with them at our grandparents' house when my grandpa's health wasn't the best. I steer away from Grandma so she can't be cruel. My grandma clearly did not like the fact that Gemma is Chinese and that Kit and Mina are half Chinese. I never understood why she doesn't like black people either, but treating kids like that is cold. She's clearly a racist. But I feel like there's more to her blatant hatred for Chinese people. Recently, my grandpa has been struggling with his health. His immune system has weakened a lot and he's been getting infections.
He's been in and out of hospital frequently, and this has caused my grandma to lash out at Gemma with a lot of stress. Every time Gemma would make a mistake, Grandma would yell at her, calling her bad words, and I even saw Gemma cry because of it. We recently received a diagnosis for Grandpa. He has stage 4 cancer. It was a blow to the family because Grandpa had always been so strong and healthy. His health had only started to deteriorate recently. My grandpa wanted to call his lawyer to rewrite his will to include all 3 of his grandbabies. My dad told me that he mentioned wanting to do so 3 months ago and had asked Grandma to call the lawyer, but Grandma had been giving excuses for why the lawyer can't make it. When Dad realized what Grandma was doing, he called the lawyer behind her back himself. So, we went to their house on the day the lawyer was supposed to arrive. Grandma wasn't pleased that we had called him behind her back, but my dad needed to have a serious conversation with her. He told her that they need to chit-chat. Grandma was cruel and said that there's nothing to discuss, and as they had already talked about his choices, she looked pointedly at Gemma as she said those last words. Dad bluntly told her to get over it. He loved Gemma, and it was time for her to move past her stupid racial prejudice. It was the first time he had addressed her racism so directly in front of everybody, and Grandpa remained in his room unaware of the drama unfolding in the living room. I attempted to mediate, reminding her that Kit and Mina were my siblings despite being of mixed race. Her disdainful gaze remained fixed on my siblings as she replied that she had known about their mixed heritage from the beginning. My dad had had enough by then, and he bluntly told her that he wanted all his children to get equal parts of the inheritance that he already had called the lawyer, and that he would be arriving any time now. Grandmother got so angry at this point and said that my siblings would only inherit anything from her dead body. She would not let them take a single penny. Dad reminded her it's not her decision to make, that Grandpa intended to include them in his will, and he would ensure of it. Grandma then claimed that she had done nothing but tolerate their presence, blaming them for disrupting their, quote, perfect family. Dad retorted that she was the one who had disrupted the family, not Gemma, Kit, or Mina. At that moment, the doorbell rings as the lawyer arrived, and I hurried to open the door, hoping to escape my grandmother's racist comments, and while the lawyer settled in, I went to fetch Grandpa. When my grandfather arrived, my grandma could not bear it any longer and left, claiming she needed to go shopping. Without giving my grandpa a chance to object, she hurried out of the house. My dad reassured my grandpa, telling him to concentrate on rewriting this will for the, time being, that she'd be fine. Soon, my grandpa was content with the finalized will, and my grandma returned. She was polite and civil in front of my ailing grandpa as he tried to bounce little Mina on his thigh as she clung to him. He expressed his happiness, feeling as though his last wish had been fulfilled. We assured him that he would be fine, it wasn't his last wish. But, despite our reassurances that he would be okay, he wasn't entirely convinced. He looked frail. It was a bad day for him. When my dad went to put Grandpa to bed, Grandmother asked Gemma if she was happy to have ruined their family. Gemma stayed silent, but I could not. I told my grandmother to back off. It wasn't her decision to make. She glared at me as if I betrayed her, and she reminded me that she was my grandma, and that I had no right to talk to her this way, so I told her that she had no right to be a jerk either. She then yelled at Father, demanding that he keeps me on a tighter leash. However, Dad was exhausted and did not pay attention to her at that point. He told everybody to get ready to go back home. Kit was scared on the way back, asking me if Grandpa would be all right. I reassured him. I don't think I convinced him, though. Kit and Mina both would be very affected if something happened to Grandpa. That I can assure you. They genuinely love him, and he loved them back so much. I'm scared of how Grandmother will react if something happens to Grandpa as well. She would be cruel to not only allow Gemma, but the kids as well as they grew older. Her pointed comments would start making sense to them, and they would be affected by her childish, racist behavior. Top comments from the original post. Comment number 1. It's heartbreaking to read about the conflict in your family because of your racist grandmother. I'm glad that you have instead stepped up and shown love and support to your step-siblings and stepmother. I admire how your father fought your grandma to ensure that all his children were treated fair and equally. I hope that with time, your grandmother will understand the importance of love over prejudice and accept Gemma, Kit, and Mina as family. I pity her for not attempting to know Gemma, Kit, and Mina. They sounded like amazing people, and it's her loss. My thoughts and best wishes are with your grandpa as he battles stage 4. I hope he recovers swiftly. With your strength and your father's determination, I hope you overcome every single obstacle in your path ahead and just emerge stronger on the other side. Comment number 2. Most hated comment of the update. Jules, I appreciate you sharing your family situation. While it's unfortunate that your grandmother has some prejudice against Chinese people, resorting to name-calling might be counterproductive. Also, I think there might be more to her story or the reason behind her behavior that we aren't aware of. I think you or your father need to have a calm conversation with her to understand her perspective better. You should be more empathetic towards her. She's old, has deep-rooted opinions. I mean, come on. Moreover, your grandpa's deteriorating health is a devastating event, so you should give your grandmother a bit of a slack. She's probably lashing out. Either way, I wish the very best for your family in such a difficult situation. I hope your grandpa gets better and can play with Mina like he so desperately wants to. Update number 1. Hey everybody, it's Jules again. Some of you mentioned that I should try to understand where my grandma might be coming from. Initially, I scoffed because I did not think that racism needs a reason, but I must admit you might have been onto something. It's been a week, and I have found some things that really shed even worse light on my grandmother. One of his better days, Grandpa called me over to help him clean out some of his stuff. I wished to spend more time with him, so I went over. He had some papers in the garage he wanted to be recycled, so I got to it as Grandpa instructed me from his chair nearby. While looking through some notebooks and papers, one of the notebooks fell down and some pictures fell out of it. I picked it up and saw a picture of my grandma with a Chinese man. Shocked, I looked inside, and it looked like my grandmother's diary from when she was young. The picture had a Chinese man hugging Grandma from behind, and it looked very coupley. I asked Grandpa who the man in the picture was. He revealed he didn't know. I put the diary away, but pocketed the picture for myself. Later that night, I noticed that there was an address right there scribbled on the back of the picture. When I realized that the place was nearby, well, I decided to go check it out the next day. When I arrived, I discovered a small warehouse at the address. I felt nervous about going in, but my presence did not go unnoticed. A man in his late 30s noticed me and gestured for me to approach him. With a bit of a gulp, I walked on over, and, well, he asked me what I was doing here. I told him I was looking for somebody and showed him the picture that I'd found. He asked me to wait while he fetched his boss. His boss turned out to be that Chinese man, not the one from the picture, though. He informed me that it was a picture of his father, Jerry. I asked if I could have a conversation with him, and he readily agreed. Jerry made it a point to check on the progress of the work every day, even though he had given the business over to his son. He was shocked to find someone waiting for him in the office. He even had some cookies, which he kindly offered me before we got to the matter at hand. I told him that I found a picture of him with my grandma. His face soured when he saw the picture, and I informed him that I was her grandchild. Jerry sighed and confessed that they have dated during their college years. He explained that he had ended the relationship because she had become excessively overbearing and bossy, making him feel suffocated due to her excessive clinginess. I asked him if she was ever racist towards him, and after some contemplation he responded that he could not recall her ever being racist towards him or any Chinese person. I thanked him. As I was about to leave, he shared a surprising detail about Grandma, her ongoing obsession with him. When I pressed for more info, he explained that When he worked here full-time, he frequently noticed a car parked nearby with somebody keeping an eye on him. It made him very uncomfortable, and he was certain it was my grandmother behind it. She still sometimes shows up at 4, which is when Jerry usually checks on his workers. So it appears my grandma's still fixated on her ex-boyfriend from nearly 5 decades ago. I'm going to reveal this to my dad. Maybe he can push some sense into her. That just because of an ex-boyfriend, she can't treat her family like this. Maybe I should show him proof of this ongoing obsession as well. Update number 2. Hey guys, it's Jules again. And before you say that following my grandma's not the best course of action, I've already done it. I collected proof of her emotional cheating on Grandpa. Let me backtrack a little. I went to meet Jerry a week ago and followed my grandma today. My grandparents' house is close to my town, so it wasn't too difficult to get there around 3 p.m. and hide outside and wait. It was so hot outside that I was considering letting the matter go, as I had been coming over every day for a week by then. But I have a teenage stubbornness, as Gemma likes to call it. When Grandma left the house today, I straightened up. As she got in the car, I took a few pictures and got ready on my bicycle to leave. I did not follow my grandma, as she would have obviously spied me following her, and I knew a shortcut that no car could fit into. I pedaled as fast as my little feet would go, hoping to get there before Grandmother was in her car. I had grossly overestimated the speed at which Grandma was likely driving. As I arrived 5 minutes before her, I'd been walking around when I spotted Grandma's car. I dove behind some bushes so suddenly that I scraped my elbow. Getting my camera ready, I took a few pictures of the car, which was unmistakably my grandma. I made sure the license plate was visible as well, and I also managed to snap a few pictures of Jerry. My grandma must have stood there just meters away from the workers for about 15 minutes, the same duration as Jerry's conversation with them outside. Once he went back inside, my grandmother started her car and drove home. I followed her using the same shortcut and took some pictures of her returning. The timestamps and the gallery details would be enough to incriminate her. When I initially told my dad about Grandma's ex-boyfriend, he wasn't too concerned. However, when I revealed that she continued to spy on him, his reaction seemed to change. His mother disgusted him after showing him the proof, and he could not believe that she would be racist towards his wife and kids just because of a past heartbreak, especially considering she still occasionally stalked that same man. He decided to share this revelation with Grandpa. I'm unsure about telling Grandpa since he's already so sick, and I don't want to bring unhappiness to him in his remaining days. However, my dad believes that Grandpa might be able to persuade Grandma to change her ways in the future. I don't know, I'm scared though. What if my insistence on getting proof backfires? I just fear that my dad's anger might turn into an act of revenge, and I don't want Grandpa to be sad, especially considering his frail, fragile health. Well, these might be his last few days. I just hope that it all ends up being for nothing. I've also asked Gemma to talk to my dad about his decision. She promised to try, and I hope that she can convince him not to tell Grandpa. Update number 3. Hey everyone, this is Jules. I have an update. It's the next day after I went to collect proof of Grandma's emotional cheating on Grandpa. Gemma was able to convince my dad not to reveal the part where Grandma went to eye her ex-boyfriend, thankfully. I asked Grandpa if he remembered the picture I found in the garage, and he confirmed that he did. I then explained that I found an address on the back of it and decided to visit. Grandpa was furious with me for going alone and reminded me of the potential dangers. I apologized for my actions, and then I revealed that I had met Jerry, the man right there in the picture. My grandma had gone white as a sheet at this point. When I shared the reason behind their breakup, that's when Grandma's anger absolutely boiled over. I told them that Jerry claimed that Grandma had been too bossy, which had made him feel suffocated because of her clinginess. My grandma asked what it had to do with anything. I pointed out that this sheds light on her blatant racism towards Gemma, Kit, and Mina, indicating that it might be linked to the fact that she never got over Jerry breaking up with her. Grandpa was confused and asked for an explanation, and I just told him about Grandma's strong negative feelings towards Gemma, Kit, and Mina. However, he didn't believe me. He tried to defend her, saying that she might come across as cold, but that did not mean she hated them. At this point, my dad decided to intervene. He confirmed my claims and revealed how Grandma had not called the lawyer he had, with the hopes that it would stop Grandpa from including Kit and Mina in the will. Horrified, my grandpa turned on my grandma and asked if this was true. Grandmother was so furious with me. She insisted that Jerry had nothing to do with it, emphasizing that she had moved on from him, and she claimed that she did not want to focus on the will while her husband was battling cancer. However, my dad brought up numerous instances when she had been unnecessarily cruel to Gemma and the kids. Grandpa was so shocked to discover that he had been blind to all of this. We reassured him that she did not act that way in front of him. That's why. Grandpa confronted Grandma and warned her that he would not give her a single penny if she continued to behave in this way. Tearfully, Grandma exclaimed that she could not believe that everybody was buying into my theory rather than trusting her. Again, emphasizing that she was over Jerry. However, I knew that was not true. She was clearly lying. She claimed it as her commitment to the family and her desire to maintain its perceived perfection. Grandpa reminded her that Gemma, Kit, and Mina did not make the family imperfect, but Grandma claimed to have done nothing wrong in wishing for her white family to remain white. Grandpa, absolutely disgusted with her racist views, shocked us all as he asked Grandma to leave the house. Grandma could not believe it, not at all. So he repeated himself one more time, making sure to say that there's no room for racist in his house. We asked him to think about it, but Grandpa remained firm and started to pack Grandma's clothes into a bag. In turn, Grandma was angry at him for behaving this way, believing him to be bluffing. Grandpa seemed to have deflated when he promptly closed the house's door in her face. We urged him to just please think about it, and he stated that he could only return if she promised to be better. Otherwise, she would not be welcome here. He could not believe that Grandma was racist and felt very, very guilty. He extended his apologies to Gemma for unintentionally causing her pain, and we learned that Grandma had gone to live with her sister temporarily. Dad supports Grandpa's decision, but Gemma and I don't like it and think it's a bit too extreme. Update number 4. Hey, it's Jules. It's been a month since my grandpa threw my grandma out of the house for her racist behavior towards his daughter-in-law and her kids. A few things have happened in that time, so let me catch you up. Lately, Grandpa has been feeling better, going on walks with his grandchildren and Gemma and spending some quality time with his son. I could tell that Grandpa missed Grandma and really hoped that she would come back with an apology. For his sake, I wish so too. My dad, on the other hand, was relieved that Grandma had been banished and would no longer be able to torment his kids. My dad and I have been helping Grandpa around the house since Grandma left, and today we were helping him with the groceries when we saw Grandma's car in the driveway. She was sitting in the vehicle and came out when she saw us approaching. Grandma approached us with a solemn expression. You see, when Grandpa asked her why she was there, she said that she had come to apologize, acknowledging her mistreatment of Gemma, Kit, and Mina. However, my dad was skeptical, believing she was only there because Grandpa wasn't going to give her any money. I agreed with him, but I also did not want my grandma to live with her sister, especially during what could be the last few months of Grandpa's life. She said that she can change and that she will try to change and understand, and Dad just scoffed, stating that she was not capable of change, especially considering not much had changed since Jerry. Grandpa looked confused, and my dad's tone made me very anxious. Dad asked me to show the proof. I looked away, not wanting to do so. He told me to give him the phone and go inside the house. Well, I reluctantly handed him the phone and ran inside as fast as I could. My dad showed my grandpa what I discovered, and that Grandma was still spying on Jerry, that she had not, and that her racism was deliberate. She was probably frustrated that she had feelings for Jerry after everything, and that's why she was taking it all out on Gemma, Kit, and Mina. At that, Grandpa got very angry. I heard him yelling even from the living room, and I felt so uncomfortable. My throat was burning. Grandpa could not believe Grandma was mistreating somebody else for things that they didn't even do. He was hurt that his wife could not move on from a man from 50 years ago, but was still spying on him? Grandma tried to defend herself, but it wasn't enough for Grandpa. My dad later revealed that Grandpa wants a divorce from Grandma, and I don't know how productive that'll be, seeing as Grandpa had cancer. However, I've been feeling very guilty ever since, wondering if I shouldn't have shown that proof to my dad, or better yet, never collected that proof in the first place. With Grandpa's declining health, I can't help but blame myself for having a hand in it. Update number 5. Hey guys, it's Jules again with what I hope to be the final update. It's been 6 months since Grandpa asked for a divorce from Grandma, and he did eventually get what he wanted. On the day of the divorce being finalized, he appeared refreshed and had been exceptionally affectionate towards Kit and Mina. I think he was hoping to love them for the grandma they didn't have in their stepmother. He even asked Gemma to cook him Chinese food, making, her feel even more included. Dad disclosed that Grandma has been living in a retirement home. Gemma did not have it in her heart to punish Grandma so severely and forced Dad to send her money every month. We have not had any contact with her in a long time, and neither of us have tried to reach out until very, very recently. Sadly, Grandpa could not hold on much longer. He passed away 2 weeks ago in the hospital, which was a difficult time for all of us. Gemma called my grandma to inform her, but she was quite rude and even blamed Gemma for Grandpa's death. When she was asked if she wanted to attend the funeral, Grandma refused, claiming that they were divorced, making it inappropriate for her to be there. I can't help but wonder if she would have come if either my dad or I extended the invitation. Grandpa, before his passing, had divided his inheritance equally among all of his grandchildren, just as he wanted. I miss him immensely. I have to go away to college in the next few weeks, and I can't imagine leaving behind my family in such a crisis. Gemma has been doing her best to get me excited about college, but we both know it's not working. I guess that's it for the update, I don't know. The guilt of having made my grandparents split is still there, but I'm grateful for Gemma, who intervened and persuaded Dad to send Grandma money even when she treated her so badly. That's it, guys. Top comments from the updates. Comment number 1. Jules, I'm deeply saddened to hear about your loss. Your grandpa sounded like an incredible man and a loving grandfather. My heartfelt condolences go out to you and your family during this difficult time. I hope you can accept that it was not your fault that your grandpa made the decision to split with his wife. It was your grandma's unfounded prejudice and mistreatment of Gemma, Kit, and Mina that was at fault. She had numerous chances to change her behavior, and yet she clung to a 50-year-old grudge, which ultimately caused these consequences. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive yourself. Your grandpa's decision was a reflection of his love for all of you. Stay strong and know that you've done the right thing by standing up for what you believe is good. Right. All the best for college, dear. Comment number 2. First of all, my condolences for your loss of your grandfather. It's hard to lose a family member you're so close to. I hope you can just get past this obstacle life's thrown at you. I agree. You should have never taken those pictures or shown them to your dad, but it wasn't all your fault. It was your father who decided to show them to Grandpa. If he hadn't, maybe your grandma would have returned and been with him in the last days. He must have loved her to have been married to her for oh so long, and getting separated from her must have hurt his heart a lot. Your father should have never done it, and I'm glad Gemma at least has a heart and has forced your father to send money to his mother. But Jules, you have nothing to feel guilty about, my dear.
Alright, so let's just discuss the final comment that we just reviewed. I do want to know your thoughts about it, but here's the main question. Do you guys agree OP should not have shown those photos to OP's dad? Because that basically made all the problems start. Well, I do want to know your thoughts. Go ahead and drop in the comment section down below either yes, it was a good idea to show the pictures, or no, it was a horrible idea because we know how the story went.
My adoptive parents are demanding I give up my wedding venue so my stepsister can have it instead. But that doesn't end there. You will not believe how they treat me as I tell them no. I'm 22 and female. I'm engaged to an amazing man, Jamie, who's also 22, and we're set to get married in the summer at a beautiful country estate. It really is everything I could have dreamt of. A lovely house surrounded by gardens. There's a lake which was weeping willows around it. It's along its bank which trail their branches into the water, and I'm looking forward to kissing my new husband underneath their shadow. I sometimes fall asleep envisioning it. I know it's a bit sickly for everyone else, but to me it's going to be the perfect end to our wedding. Jamie and I are both huge lovers of nature, and for us as having a wedding surrounding by nature's beauty is the best we could ever hope for. We're getting married in the gardens as I did not want to be inside when there was all this beauty to see outside. Jamie and I met through work, and we've been together for 2 years now. We work for an environmental agency, and he fell for me when I was covered in mud and sliding around in a river. So I knew that a man who could love me covered in sludge and pond weak was something who would always be by my side. I have an interesting one, I suppose. I work as a description, relationship with my family. Before I get into details of the main problem that I want to share, I should give you a background so you can form a picture of my story. I know it'll be at my viewpoint, but obviously that's all I can give you with some added opinions that Jamie also has said over the last 2 years. This may be a long introduction, but it's really a big bucket of worms that's now been opened. I was adopted as a baby. I was only 4 weeks old when my parents took me. I've never met my biological mother, and I have no interest in doing so. Or, at least, I've never really thought about it. All I know is that she was incredibly young and had issues with her own family. I was given up for adoption immediately after my birth. My adoptive parents have been trying for a child with no luck, and have been told that they will not be able to have bio children. I found out later that the adoption was at my dad's idea, and my mom went along with it as he wanted a family and she was worried he would leave her if she could not have a baby. That's stupid, as my dad is the most gentle, loving man who ever lived. He's a big guy, and he has a huge beard, which can make him look intimidating, I suppose, but he's a big old teddy bear. A big old teddy bear who loves. He's a park ranger, and it's where my love of nature actually comes from. I've spent hours out with him in the mountains and woods, and over the years we've nursed a few fair creatures back to health. He taught me a healthy respect for predators, which will come in later for the story. We're not a rich family, but we're not poor either. My dad's family are careful with money, and we do live well. I often wonder who my mom and dad got together, as she hates living in the mountains, and spends a lot of time away in the city. Anyways, I digress. A year after I was adopted, my mom fell pregnant with my sister Holly. We are, therefore, remarkably close in age. My mom immediately transferred all her love and attention to Holly. I now know that when she fell pregnant, she'd asked my dad if they could, quote, just give the other one back. My dad responded absolutely not, and put it down the pregnancy hormones. But my relationship with my mom and sister has always been strained. I guess I didn't really notice it until I was a bit older, as I was just a young child. I was oblivious to the fact that I was different. My dad has gone out of his way to make sure I'm always loved and cherished, and I'll be forever grateful for that. I found out I was adopted when I turned 7 years old. My dad said they'd always planned to tell me, but he wanted to tell me when I was older and able to process the information clearly. I'm sure he never expected me to find out because my mom was mad that I've not listened to her and snapped at me and saying this. I guess you get this behavior from your real mother. She's obviously a troublemaker getting pregnant at 15. I didn't know what she meant, so I went and asked my dad, who, although was furious with my mom, took time to first explain what adoption meant. Unlike my mom, he was kind about my biological mother and told me that she was just very young, and by putting me up for adoption, she had made a choice to ensure that I would have the best life possible. In his explanation, my biological mom was brave and selfless by making that decision. Not the stupid little girl of mom's explanation. Well, once I knew, my mom seemed to change as though there was no point even pretending that I was her real daughter, and that included how she acted in front of Holly, who, as she grew older, picked up on it and refused to call me her sister. She would tell the other kids at school that she was only child, and when they said, isn't she your sister? She would reply, she's adopted, she doesn't count. It hurt, but I grew so used to it that after a while I barely thought about it. I was protected from so much by my father and grandpa that I did not even think I was affected as much as I could have been if I did not have them. Anyways, fast forward to current events. The past will probably creep in and out of the story, as no matter how much you try to run from your past, it has a nasty way of creeping up on you. Jamie proposed to me just after Christmas. He wanted to get married as soon as possible. Luckily, we already had an idea where we wanted the venue, and we were able to get it done by summer. I knew that planning the wedding of my dreams in a short time would be a lot of work, but Jamie was ready to help, and I was confident that we could do it. It was just after New Year's following the proposal that the first signs of trouble appeared. I was talking to my grandpa about my plans, and he handed me a check that would cover the cost of the venue and all the vendors. I was speechless and said that he didn't have to pay for everything, as Jamie and I had the funds put aside. He smiled and said, "It's not all for me. Your dad has added to it but wanted to keep it between us. Your mom has funny ideas, so let's not rattle her cage." Well, honestly, I was hurt that they even felt this was needed, and part of me thought they were actually in the wrong. But it turned out that they were being prudent. My mom and sisters said all the right words when I announced that Jamie and I were engaged, but I felt that the words from their mouth did not exactly match the look on their faces. I saw Holly exchange looks with my mother a few times that night, but I was too caught up in my happiness to even care. I should have known trouble was brewing when less than a week after Jamie asked to be his wife. Holly arrived the next family dinner wearing an engagement ring with all that could probably be seen from space. It was huge. Well, she waved it around, and there was definitely a lot more excitement on my mom's part at Holly's announcement than mine. My dad, however, looked disappointed and sad. As this was an introduction to the drama, I should probably introduce Holly's fiancé, Ben. Ben's older than she is. He's 28 years of age, while Holly's just 21. She met him in a bar while out with friends celebrating her 21st birthday. I wasn't invited, by the way, and they've been together a whole 6 months. To say that they were a new relationship would be an understatement, as they barely knew each other. Holly said that he was the love of her life, and when you know, you know. Remember when I said my dad taught me to recognize a predator? Well, Ben, I saw one from the first time I've met him. I tried to express my worries to Holly, but she told me to back off and stop being jealous that her man's better than mine. I just put a big smile on my face and tried to be happy for her. I really did. Until the issue that I'm writing about just came up. Holly came to see our venue, and at the time she tooted and rolled her eyes the whole time, but as it was my wedding, I simply did not care. I'd asked her to be my bridesmaids out of a family duty, but I'm sure she would prefer not to be. The problem came to light 2 days later when I was sitting down for lunch with my mom, dad, and Holly. Holly kept nudging my mom and pulling faces, which to be fair was kinda normal, but she seemed desperate for something, and then my mom dropped the bombshell. Holly wanted the same venue as me. She not only wanted the same venue, but she wanted it before me. Mom had phoned and booked the earlier date, but there's no vacancies. The only free date was 7 months after ours, which would mean a winter wedding. I said that was a shame, but it was a popular venue, and a winter wedding could be nice. We live in an area where we get snow, so it would be pretty. My mom smiled and said that she was glad I could see that the winter wedding could be beautiful, as it was only fair that I move my wedding to that date and allow Holly to marry first. Guys, I was absolutely stunned. I looked at them and then over at my father, who looked as shocked as I did. Holly was sitting with a smug look on her face, and I didn't know what to do, or even say. I mean, obviously, it's not going to happen. That was my date for my wedding, and I was not going to give it up. I maybe did not handle it well, if I'm being honest, and I stood up, told them to go to HE double hockey sticks, that I hated my family, and then stormed out. That was yesterday, and now I simply feel awful. As soon as I left, the phone started to ring, but I turned it off, so I didn't know how to deal with it and went to Jamie's house. I guess I'm looking for reassurance that I'm right to not give my sister my wedding date and the venue just because my mom said so. Why should I? I'm in such a mess. I need to think and sleep, and I'll let you know what I decide once my anger's cooled down. Update number 1. So yeah, last night I was mad as heck. I would not say I was much happier in the morning, though. I've finally spoken to my dad, and he has reassured me that I have no obligation to give Holly my date and venue. He said he had no idea what they were even going to ask me that, and he would have told them to stop if he would have known. After I left, Mom and Holly had some pretty awful things about me which my dad would not tell me. But I have an idea of what they could possibly say. I said I'd be staying with Jamie for a while as I didn't want to be in the house, especially with them there. Dad understood and said he would deal with things. As far as I'm concerned, I'll be putting them and their delusions to one side and concentrating on my wedding. Update number 2. I should have waited before I did the last update and said that things were going to be sorted. I guess that's what people call tempting fate. Jamie and I had a quiet few days, our lives is plodding on as normal. We went back to work, came home, looked at wedding things, and were pretty happy all in all. Until it wasn't good anymore, and was instead a big pile of stress, and appearance of past family issues was rising to the surface like a boiling geyser. I was at work with Jamie when my phone rang, and it was the venue. They said they were calling to confirm some details following the email correspondence. I was confused and said, "Wait, what?" Which was not the most elegant response I know. The reception out in the middle of nowhere was not great, and I was standing up to my waist in cold river water, so I managed to ask for things to be emailed to me as I couldn't hear very well. The hotel agreed, and I put it back to my mind, distracted by my work. In fact, I forgot about it until I checked my work emails, and I saw the email from the hotel. I opened it and read it 3 times, not entirely sure what I was even reading. Well, I called Jamie over to read it on my shoulder before I lost my mind. The email said this as followed. "We are pleased to confirm that we've looked at the details sent to us and will be accommodating the changes as requested. Please could you fill in the following paperwork confirming the names of the bride and groom who'll be joining up on you on your wedding date, and confirm that the new dates agreed between you for the new date for the original parties." I looked at Jamie, and even though I knew that the answer to the question said was, "You did not change anything, did you?" Obviously, Jamie had not sent an email, and I began to realize how long and low my mom and Holly were prepared to sink. Well, I called my dad and told him what happened. He was absolutely furious, and said he would deal with it and talk to me once he's spoken to Mother. As a precaution, I emailed the venue and said that I've not agreed to any changes, that the original date was still my wedding date, not my sister's. I spent the last hour pacing my room like a caged tiger, waiting for my father to contact me. I was ready to go home and fight it out with my mom and Holly, but Jamie was the voice of reason and said to let my dad deal with it. I'm angry, I'm a crying mess, and I'm sorry this is a lot for an update. Well, I'm just waiting for people to sort things out for me, but I'll update when I hear from my dad. What's up everybody, Mr. Reddito here. I hope you guys are enjoying this story so far, and I hope you're having a great day. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito, and I read stories every single day, narrating some of the most dramatic stories on the World Wide Web. Update number 3 is about to happen right now, and if you think things were crazy, you've seen nothing yet. Update number 3, here it is. This will be longer and more of a harsh update, so you might want to sit down and get a stiff drink. My dad called me after talking to my mom and sister, and they said that I've agreed to the changes, which was stupid, a very stupid argument to make, as I was obviously going to deny it. They told my dad that I've made the arrangement with Holly and Ben, and they would not change their story. I told my dad it's obviously a pile of lies, and to his credit, he agreed as he knew that there's no way I would have given them a date in the venue. My dad said he wanted to have a family meeting to get all the bad blood out and try to work out the reason why there's so much hostility between Holly and I. I initially said absolutely not. No way, not a chance. My dad sounded a little disappointed on the phone that I did give in and agree to sit down and chalk this out. I left this update until after the meeting, as I assumed that it would be the final update and everything would be settled. I did not expect the hate-filled tirade that was about to come my way, and the actual things that my mom and sister had done and planned to do. I wish I could say that this is all going to have a happy ending, but there's no way that anything good can come from this. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, aren't I? Let's start in the beginning. If this takes too much mentality from me, I might do it in 2 parts. I'm drained and don't have anything left in me. Jamie and I arrived at my parents' home with my grandpa. He had picked us up and offered to drive us back there. I think he knew in advance that this was going to be rough. And honestly, we might need a drink. He's a really great man. So we arrived with my mom, Holly, and Ben just sitting at the table looking confident and smug. So my heart sank as I was hoping Ben would not be there. He made me feel uncomfortable, and at the time I didn't really know why. I do now, though. He's an awful human being, and I hate him with my entire being. But more of that soon. My dad was putting on a cheerful face and trying to keep the peace, but he was fighting a losing battle. As the 2 sides glared at each other with barely concealed contempt, my dad started the conversation, asking about why my mom had tried to change the dates of the wedding. My mom went on about how I'd agreed with what was just said, and I did not agree now to make trouble. I said she's lying. I would have never have agreed to that. I did not know even Holly and Ben had been settling a date yet, and Holly has been rude about the venue when I chose it, so why would she want it anyways? All she had to do was pick somewhere else, and she could get married whenever she wanted. I did not add that I would not be there, but there's no way I was going to her wedding to Ben. My mom called me selfish, and then the knives came out. She looked right at my dad and asked why he was supporting me over his real daughter. I stared at her, and before my dad could speak, I shouted, "I am his real daughter." Holly laughed and said, "No, you're not. You're not even blood family. You're just a hanger-on. When are you going to get that hint that we don't want you? No one does. Not your real mom either, and we don't either." Guys, I was speechless, and I just stared at them. I could not believe that my mom and sister hated me so much. What have I ever done to deserve it? My dad was quiet for a while and finally slowly said that he had 2 daughters. I was his oldest, and I would always be his daughter. My mom spat out that I would never be hers, and she didn't want me in the house after the meeting. By now, I was in tears, and I saw the sly smile on Ben's face at that point, and then shared looks between him and Holly. My mom had always favored Holly, but this was bad even for her, and I started to realize that her mind was being poisoned against me. Ben then joined the conversation and added gasoline to the already hot fire. And then he looked at Jamie with the look that I think was supposed to care, say, "Sorry to have to tell you this, buddy, but your wife-to-be is not loyal to you. She's been trying to get with me for ages." I stared at Ben and finally snapped, shouting at him he's delusional. There's no way on earth I would want to be anywhere near him. He makes my skin crawl. That's when Holly looked smugged and pushed Ben's phone across the table to Jamie. She looked as though she had the winning hand of an important poker game, as she said, "It's all there in the writing, Jamie. She's lying. She's a cheater. Sorry, I can't even type what she called me." I looked at the phone and laughed. Jamie picked it up and stared, reading the messages, and his face went from disbelief to anger. And for a minute I was worried he was falling for their tricks. He slowly slid the phone over to me, and I read through the filth that I had apparently sent to Ben. The low-life pond scum. I pointed out that it was not my phone number, but Holly said I was obviously not going to use my real number and must have had another phone that I used to cheat on Jamie with. My mom just sat there, looking like a cat that got the cream, and I was not sure if she was in on the plan to try to destroy my relationship or if she actually believed it to be true. My dad and grandpa stayed silent, and I found out later they were letting me fight for myself unless I looked like I was struggling. The truth is, they had total faith in me, which I'm forever grateful for. I looked over at Jamie and asked him what he thought, and before he had a chance to answer, Holly spoke. "Well, seeing as OP's a cheater, I don't think you'll need that wedding date, will you, Jamie? So Ben and I are actually doing you a favor, as you won't be needing the stress of canceling everything. We'll just take all the same vendors as you've booked. You can even come to our wedding if you like, but not you," she added, looking right at me. I asked her if she really thought I would want to cheat on the man I've loved with her slime ball of a fiancé. Well, at this point, Holly gets upset, asking what's wrong with her man. I'd be lucky if he even looked at me, as I was ugly, and he already had a beautiful girlfriend. She added I must get my looks from my junkie mother. As far as I know, my biological mother was not on any drugs in her life. Jamie finally spoke up, saying that he did not believe their lies for a minute, and that they were truly sad and pathetic for trying to go this far. They obviously had issues within their own lives if they wanted to try to ruin ours so desperately. I looked at my dad and said that I appreciate that he tried to help, but I was not prepared to sit and listen to their lies any longer. My mother finally spoke and said that when she had spoken to the venue, she'd ask about the catering, etc., and she was in contact with all the vendors. She made it very clear that she would not be allowing Dad to pay for any of my weddings, as I wasn't his real daughter. That phrase was thrown around a lot that night. She also mentioned she had emailed them all to say that we would no longer be needing their services. I said she was lying because I would have heard from them. Holly laughed and said that Ben had set up new emails in my name, and they've emailed everyone saying my email had been hacked, so to use this one instead. She laughed and said it's a shame about your wedding dress being canceled too. Guys, that was the absolute final straw, and I hate to admit this, but I lost it. I lost my ever-loving temper, and I threw the water from my glass into Ben's ugly face. All this did was make him laugh, and Holly said I was showing my true colors. As I pushed my chair away from the table and asked my grandpa to take me home, my mom twisted the knife that was already stuck deep, metaphorically, between my ribs. She said that, as at the moment I was disowned and I would be out of the inheritance, as Holly was the only one who should be getting money, being the real daughter. I may or may not have told her where she could shove the money before I left, as the anger took over, and Grandpa and Jamie ushered me out of the house in tears. Well, my dad came and whispered in my ear that I should leave it with him, and he'll be around to talk with me in the morning. I looked at him, still crying, and told him I love him, and my grandpa took me home. In the car, my grandpa told me everything's going to be okay. He loves me, and that they would see me tomorrow. I found out later he went back to the house to support my father, but I only found out the following day, so I was left destroyed and broken by the hate thrown at me, by the people that should be loving me. I can do nothing now but wait for my dad tomorrow to see if I've truly lost everything from my wedding to my family. Update number 4, final update. I was going to tag the conversation with my dad on the last update, but I fell asleep, and then this morning I thought this needed its own conclusion. Life has really turned upside down for us all, and all the family and I thought that I've been split in my half. My dad and Grandpa tore my mom, Holly, and Ben to strips of the treatment of me. Not just because of the wedding, but for my entire life treatment. I spent the morning emailing all the vendors to explain what happened, but one were able to still attend. The one that can't was very helpful and sorted out a friend of theirs who would also provide the services and would stand in. My dress is safe, so that was a relief. So I guess I'll just conclude this nightmare with the major changes that'll be happening from this point on. Firstly, my wedding will be happening on the date I booked, and my dad's spoken to them to say that unless they hear from either Jamie and I or him in person, to double-check all emails and correspondence before acting on it. He told them in detail that his wife and younger daughter had nothing to do with the wedding. He also told me that he's contacted his lawyer to make an appointment to look at the inheritance side of things. He said I was not to worry about that. I said I wasn't worried as money's not even my focus, Dad. His love was, and I just wanted to know he loved me as his daughter. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, and he cried as he said he loved me more than life itself. He told me how he was proud he was of me and that he would always be by my side. My grandpa said the same, and I felt so loved. Then came the bombshell. My dad told me he had not been happy in his marriage for a long time. My mom had pushed him time and time again to, quote, get rid of me, and he had tried to ignore it, but this was the final straw. As the house came a part of his job, he had told my mom to make arrangements to move out within a week. Ben has a house, so Holly can go there. He's also made it very clear that he disapproved of Ben, and that he was well aware of what he thought he was marrying into a family with money. Holly had yelled that Ben loved her, so my dad said that was good, because he would not be getting any money from us. Dad said when he said that, Ben's face dropped, and he did not think he would stick around once he realized Holly had nothing to offer him. The whole extended family is aware of what's happened, and they mostly support Dad and me. There's a few of my mom's side that seem to think she's right in her view that I'm not a real daughter to my dad, but their opinions don't really affect us. My mom and Holly tried to lay down the ultimatum that it was me or them, and Dad said that was their choice, and he would miss them, but he was not abandoning me. I tried to protest, but he laughed and said they would change their mind, don't worry. He just needed to let them cool their heads for a while. So it's a mixed conclusion, really. Not all good, not all bad. I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with my mom and Holly again, but I'm happy. I'll always have Jamie, my dad, and Grandpa who love me. Life is like that, I guess. You win some, and you lose some. Alright guys, so I have mixed feelings about this one. I want to first shout out the grandfather and OP's stepfather for this, because if it was not for those two people, I think that OP would have been treated so much worse. But at the same time, I think the stepfather was an absolute doormat for most of the time. He didn't stand up for OP until the very end. I mean, yeah, he did certain little jabs here and jabs there, but I think he allowed way too much mistreatment from the mother, who was the one who wanted to adopt in the first place, and the stepsister, who was raised to be like that. Let me know your exact thoughts of this story, guys. If you don't agree with me, that's totally cool, but let's talk about it in the comment section. Go ahead and drop your thoughts down below. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I read stories here every single day. If that's something you're into, consider subscribing. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll catch you in the next one.